good to go, Mayor.
Good to go. All right. It is April 12th, 2022, our City Council work session calling to order. Just as notice to the public, the City Council may vote to go into executive session for legal advice on any of the agendized items. Ms. Salzberg, roll call, please.
Mayor Deasy,
Here.
Vice Mayor Sweet,
Here.
Councilmember Aslan,
Present and pulling up.
Councilmember McCarthy,
Here.
Councilmember Salas,
Present.
Councilmember Shimoni.
Here.
All right. With that, Vice Mayor Sweet, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Thank you. And Councilmember McCarthy, our mission statement, please.
Well, thank you, Mayor, for the opportunity. The mission of the City of Flagstaff is to protect and enhance the quality of life for all.
Thank you. And tonight I'll be reading the land acknowledgement. The Flagstaff City Council humbly acknowledges the ancestral homelands of this area's indigenous nations and original stewards. These lands, still inhabited by Native descendants, border mountains sacred to indigenous peoples. We honor them, their legacies, their traditions, and their continued contributions. We celebrate their past, present, and future generations who will forever know this place is home. That brings us to agenda item number 4 for public participation, and we do have 3 individuals, starting with Michael Cox, please, if you'd like to come down. Oh, just right in front of the mic. Yeah, right there. Be perfect.
Hello. My name is Michael Cox, United States Army, 85 to 93, 2 years after that, United States Army Reserve. My question is being brought to you because of the recent events that have happened to me, and they're primarily from Flagstaff Police Department and Fire Department. I am no longer allowed to go to the shelter while I wait on Nation's Finest to help me get housing. So I've been sleeping on the ground. They refuse to let me in there because they say that I have alternative housing, but this takes time. It doesn't happen like overnight. I know I have 3 minutes, so I'm trying to do this as fast as I can. As a veteran, I do not feel that this is appropriate or congruent with a lifestyle that I want to have, sleeping on a sidewalk at night. I think I served my country enough. I'm honorably discharged, and I can prove it. I know that I do not deserve to sleep like that. Even though the shelter is not the best place to be, I do have maybe another opportunity, but not like that. So with that being said, I would like for you guys, ladies, to understand that there has to be another opportunity for me to have a place to sleep besides on that sidewalk. The officer last night was ready to go in there and push, I mean literally push, for me to have somewhere to sleep. It doesn't do any good for him to do one thing for one night and then turn around for me to have to do it again to another night. So with that being said, it happens to be not only just myself, but there's other veterans out there on the street right now that have to face the same thing. We don't have the opportunity to sometimes speak. Nobody listens. We're just veterans that are homeless. They're helping me. I'm college educated. I do have a master's degree in counseling. I'm trying to get myself back together. I am not trying to just live off the property, so to speak. And I don't think that I want to encourage anybody else to do something like that, but I do encourage that other veterans would step up and say, look, man, there has to be a better opportunity for us, besides saying that this is what we have, and that's it. And saying that we have all these opportunities out there for alternative housing, which takes time. Time's up, 5 seconds. Sir?
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Sean, would you mind giving Mr. Cox my card, and we can help address potentially some of the issues faced? We unfortunately aren't able to have a two back and forth in the public participation agenda item, but I would like to see where we might be able to help troubleshoot with you. So Mr. Johnson right there in the orange plaid shirt will be able to give you some contact info, and hopefully we can work with you here.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next individual is Maria Robinson.
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. So I just wanted to, I won't take 3 minutes, wanted to bring up this month as dedicated to National Distracted Driving Awareness Month. So this is a month dedicated by National Safety Council. As the risk manager, I think you guys have already probably seen some of the messages I've been sending out. So that's sort of a weekly campaign, posters, little videos, little tips on how to share the road with pedestrians and large trucks in construction zones, motorcycles, things we don't see, tips on what distracted driving means and how to avoid some of those pitfalls. It isn't just texting, it's setting your maps ahead of time, looking at the route, knowing when you're traveling, when that sun is setting, when it's rising. So we're doing sort of a campaign across the city. Like I said, I've put out some national stats to accompany those messages, as well as just some of the local ones within the city. So I just wanted to sort of raise everybody's level of awareness on this. And like I said, it's a campaign for the whole month, so you'll be seeing more of those. But, you know, drive down the numbers and increase our level of awareness. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Did you, questions? No? Okay.
Unfortunately, yeah, during public participation, we can't have the back and forth, unfortunately. But thank you for bringing awareness. Definitely read the emails, and yeah, appreciate the advocacy, and very important in our community. With that, I do believe we have one online participant for general public participation, Taylor Suda.
Hello, council members. I also probably won't take a few minutes, but I wanted to talk a bit about the proclamation that'll come forward to you that I'm really hoping that you'll pass. My name is Taylor Suda. I'm a high school senior from Basis Flagstaff, and I'm also an intern at the City of Flagstaff's housing section. And it makes me really excited to see you, Mayor DC, and the rest of the Flagstaff City Council considering this proclamation to recognize and the need for continued fair housing awareness and commitments, especially for LGBTQ plus people. Same-sex couples are 73% more likely to be denied a mortgage compared to their heterosexual counterparts. And on average, same-sex couples also face $86 million more in annual interest and fees for housing. Furthermore, in Arizona, 27% of trans people have faced some form of housing discrimination. I can't even imagine how those numbers compound when an individual is both LGBTQ plus and belongs to other protected classes. I'm happy to see that while Flagstaff currently doesn't have a fair housing ordinance in our city code, this council and the mayor are still being committed to fair housing in our community, and I look forward to seeing what this council will do in the future to expand housing in our community. I'd also like to take this opportunity to mention that tomorrow at 9 a.m. in partnership with the Southwest Fair Housing Council, the City of Flagstaff is hosting a virtual fair housing training for anyone in our community. More information is on the City of Flagstaff's website. The housing section is also spreading awareness on our Facebook page through the month of April for fair housing regarding different races and protected classes for housing. I appreciate you all for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Suda, and thank you for providing those statistics. Those are very eye-opening. With that, we are down to our proclamations here, starting with National Telecommunicators Week. And if you would like to come up here, Ms. Grandis and the team, and we will move up front here. Katie, everyone, thank you for being here. Now, emergencies can occur at any time that require police, fire, emergency medical services. And when an emergency occurs, the prompt response of police officers, firefighters, and paramedics is critical to the protection of life and preservation of property. And the safety of our police officers and firefighters is dependent upon the quality and accuracy of information obtained from citizens who telephone the City of Flagstaff Emergency Communications Center. And public safety telecommunicators are the first and most critical contact our citizens have with emergency services. Public safety telecommunicators are the single vital link for our police officer and firefighters by monitoring their activities by radio, providing them information, and ensuring their safety. And public safety telecommunicators of the City of Flagstaff have contributed substantially to the apprehension of criminals, suppression of fires, and treatment of patients. Each dispatcher has exhibited compassion, understanding, and professionalism during the performance of their job in the past year. Therefore, I, Mayor Paul Deasy, Mayor of the City of Flagstaff, do hereby proclaim the week of April 10th as National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week in Flagstaff, in honor of the men and women whose diligence and professionalism keep our city and our citizens safe. Thank you. And Katie, you're welcome. If you would like to say a few comments, you're welcome to, or you have to. No, you don't have to.
Well, thank you for the acknowledgement, because we are often the voices that people hear but they never really see. So thank you for the proclamation, and it is such an honor to serve our citizens of our community. That's why we do the job. So thank you.
We'll get a little picture. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we are down to agenda item number 6, which is 2022 National Service Recognition Day. And Russ, do you want to come down with your team? Awesome. Thank you for being here. Service to others is a hallmark of the American character. And throughout our history, citizens have stepped up to meet challenges by volunteering in their communities. AmeriCorps provides opportunities for approximately 270,000 Americans to serve their communities through an intensive commitment to service at nonprofits, schools, public agencies, and community and faith-based groups across the country. And AmeriCorps enriches the lives of its members and volunteers, building habits that create engaged citizens who are active participants in civic matters affecting their communities long after their service terms are completed. AmeriCorps members and volunteers encourage collaboration and partnerships, leveraging additional volunteers in service and acquiring the support of businesses, foundations, and public and community agencies to increase the effectiveness of their initiatives. In Arizona, more than 6,800 AmeriCorps members and volunteers of various ages and backgrounds help meet local needs in more than 550 locations in Flagstaff and other communities by tutoring or mentoring children and youth, supporting veterans and military families, combating the opioid epidemic, restoring the environment, and responding to disasters. In exchange for their service, AmeriCorps members and volunteers develop valuable work skills, earn money for continuing education, and strengthen the lives of their families, communities, and the city of Flagstaff. Since AmeriCorps was founded in 1994, more than 24,000 AmeriCorps members in Arizona served more than 26 million hours. 26 million hours. And qualified for Seagull AmeriCorps Education Awards totaling more than $65.5 million. National Service Recognition Day is an opportunity to recognize the dedication and commitment of the more than 1 million Americans who have chosen to serve their country through AmeriCorps, and to encourage more Americans to follow their steps in service. Therefore, be it resolved that I, Paul Deasy, Mayor of Flagstaff, do hereby designate Tuesday, April 12th, 2022, as National Service Recognition Day in Flagstaff, and urge citizens to recognize AmeriCorps members, volunteers, and alumni for their service and to find their own ways to give back to their communities. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. Russ, you're welcome to say a few words if you would like.
Thanks very much for your support of AmeriCorps programs in Flagstaff and beyond. It's great to be a part of a community that supports AmeriCorps and AmeriCorps seniors, volunteers, and members. And yeah, we appreciate your support. Thanks. Consider serving yourselves. Thanks.
Let's get a little
Yeah.
photo op here for everyone. So.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, nice to see you. All right, we're going to switch a little bit of the order here. Do we have an individual from Water Services here? Excellent. Oh, Andy, he's here. Yeah. Oh, yeah, you can come around and wrap around if you'd like. Yeah, if you'd like to come on in front here, the esteemed crew. Our frontline employees in water and wastewater operations and maintenance are essential to continuing safe and reliable water and wastewater services, day in and day out. Their resiliency demonstrated throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. And the city of Flagstaff has secured a diversity of water resources, groundwater and vast underground aquifers, runoff from mountain rainfall and snowmelt collected from spring recharge in the Lake Mary reservoirs, and recycled wastewater treated to the highest reuse standard available in Arizona. In every home and every sector of the city of Flagstaff economy, from finance to healthcare, requires safe and reliable water to thrive. Riparian corridors are important water-dependent environmental resources that contribute to the city of Flagstaff's beauty and offer unique recreational opportunities. The city of Flagstaff is a leader in responsible development and sustainable management of water resources as a rural Arizona community outside the state's active management areas with a 100-year designation of adequate water supply. The city of Flagstaff values and supports the water reuse community through adopting and promoting reclaimed water use and investigating potable reuse opportunities. The City of Flagstaff invests annually in water-related programs and projects that provide drinking water and sanitary services, protect public health and the environment, and improve water supply reliability. And water conservation, efficiency, and water reuse are vital components of water management for a sustainable water future. Protection of our water resources is essential to the City of Flagstaff's future and the future of our neighbors and requires a well-trained workforce of water professionals. Arizona's water industry offers a wide variety of rewarding career opportunities in water operations, engineering, hydrology, biology, policy, economics, business administration, law, and communications. And thousands of water, wastewater, and recycled water industry professionals in northern Arizona and across the state are dedicated to ensuring these water resources are safe and reliable for use by Arizonans and are well managed for future generations. Now therefore be it resolved that the City of Flagstaff joins the State of Arizona in declaring April 11th through 17th, 2022 as Water Professionals Appreciation Week, and extends its sincere gratitude and appreciation to the water professionals who are on the front line of the delivery and treatment of the City of Flagstaff's safe and reliable water. Thank you. And anyone want to say a few words? Welcome to.
Thank you, Mayor Deasy and members of the council. We really appreciate your words in the proclamation, and thank you to the Water Services team for the efforts and all the water professionals, particularly in Arizona. There's currently the water conference that's taking place right now, some events at the state capitol, and when we say that the City of Flagstaff has dedicated professionals working for our water current use and our future use, that is the absolute truth. When we say water is life, we do our best to protect that life now and into the future. So from water collection, production, distribution, to wastewater collection and treatment, to the use of our reclaimed water to water our parks like Fox Glen, Bushmaster, all of our soccer fields and play fields in our community, and from our folks that provide the education in our schools with water resources management. We just really appreciate all the efforts in the City of Flagstaff, and we appreciate you, Mayor and Council, for that recognition. So thank you.
We gotta get a photo op here. Who wants to hold it? Thank you. Thank you. You wanna jump? I'll jump in there, sure.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, well, let's do the fair housing proclamation up here as well, since we're already up here. And I understand we have people tapping in electronically, getting the proclamation. So I'll pass it on to them, but since we're already up here. The month of April has been designated as Fair Housing Month by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity. The Federal Fair Housing Act, enacted on April 11, 1968, and the Federal Fair Housing Act amendments of 1988 prohibit discriminatory housing practices. The Fair Housing Act, as amended, and other federal laws ensure full and fair access to housing and equal opportunities for all, regardless of race, color, religion, sex, disability, familial status, or national origin, and is a fundamental goal of our nation, state, and our city. President Joe Biden, in Executive Order 13988, issued guidance further prohibiting housing discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, and HUD implemented this order into fair housing law in February 2021. Members of the above protected classes are increasingly and disproportionately more vulnerable to displacement, rental housing discrimination, poor quality housing, and barrier to opportunity due to rising home ownership and rental housing costs. And equal access to housing being a critical component of family and community health and stability. It impacts our children's access to education, our ability to seek and retain employment options, the cultural benefits we enjoy, and the quality of health care we receive in emergencies. And solutions to creating and protecting rental housing choice and home ownership requires all programs of government to affirmatively address the removal of barriers to housing choice. And the City of Flagstaff recognizes that and values the efforts of those who seek to reduce barriers to full and fair housing opportunities, and the talents of grassroots and nonprofit organizations, housing service providers, financial institutions, elected officials, city government, and others must be combined to promote and preserve integration, fair housing, and equal opportunity. And the City of Flagstaff continues to work to eliminate discrimination in housing to provide citizens with the opportunity to live in safe, decent, and affordable housing. Now therefore, I, Mayor Paul Deasy, Mayor of the City of Flagstaff, do hereby proclaim April 2022 as Fair Housing Month. With that, I do understand, Ms. Pavlik, we have you on, and we'd be happy to hear a few words from you if you'd like.
Thank you so much. I'm really sorry I can't be with you all this afternoon, but I did want to say thank you, Mayor DC and Council, for recognizing the importance of fair housing. Not only is our dedication to affirmatively furthering fair housing a requirement of our community development block grant funding, but it's also crucial for ensuring that all Flagstaff community members have opportunities to access safe, decent, and affordable housing. I also wanted to thank our intern Taylor for her work to coordinate free fair housing trainings this last month and throughout April with Southwest Fair Housing Council. Those have been open to our community members as well as housing sector professionals. We also have a training set up for city staff. She's also been working on an amazing educational campaign for our social media accounts and our newsletters. I also wanted to give a shout out to Northern Arizona Association of Realtors for their dedication to fair housing and their efforts to provide information to the public on their rights under the Fair Housing Act. So thank you again, Council and Mayor DC, for your work to ensure housing is accessible to all of our neighbors.
Thank you, Christine. We appreciate all the work that you and the team have been doing in this room.
Thank you.
All right, crew. All right, that brings us down to agenda item number 9, which is the review of draft agenda for the April 19th, 2022 council meeting. Council, do we have any questions, concerns, issues with the draft agenda for next week? All right. Last call. All right, thank you. We're down to agenda item number 10 then, which is the city manager report. City manager, you're on stage.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Good afternoon. The report, which is now coming your way during these work sessions, is fairly brief. There's some updates there with respect to our fire department. The mayor and I and some elected officials attended the 3-year badge pinning catch-up ceremony a week or two back, and it was remarkable, a wonderful event. Nice to see everybody getting together in person and recognizing our hardworking firefighters for their achievements. Some nice photos in the report for you on that. Some updates with our Human Resources and Risk Management Division there for your enjoyment. Also some nice updates from our police department and a very nice recognition of Nancy Dahlwin. I hope I'm getting that name correct. Dahlwin, I believe. She's been promoted to Records Section Manager, filling in for the retirement of Sharon Whitmore. Congratulations to you, Nancy. And also some updates from the Pros Division for your reading enjoyment, including some updates with respect to the Aquaplex and the Hal Jensen Center, and a number of other tidbits of information. Very important, very good stuff. Also some updates from Public Works. Street sweeping is in full operation these days. Of course, as I say that, we're expecting more weather, but hopefully the streets will remain clear. I did get on the weather earlier today. It looks like very cold temperatures tonight, so too bad for the fruit trees, but not seeing a lot of precipitation at this time. Let's see, some updates with respect to fleet services and facilities. Thank you all for your hard work. It's been noted, but I will mention it again. We attended a very productive meeting on Tuesday, April 5th with the Army Corps of Engineers and the BNSF Railroad team. The topic, of course, being that of the Rio to Flag project. A very good meeting, very productive. Props to Kristen Cameron and Trevor Henry and the entire Capitol team for their continued hard work on that. We're seeing some forward momentum on this very important and exciting project. Stay tuned. On the subject of capital projects, you have appended to the report this time the monthly update from our capital improvements team. I would invite Mr. Rick Barrett to come down and give you some high-level overview of that. There's a lot of things in play. After that concludes, we have a few employee work anniversaries to recognize, so bear with us here. Mr. Barrett, microphone's yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Clifton. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Vice Mayor and members of council. I'm Rick Barrett, City Engineer. Give me 5 minutes and I'll just quickly highlight what's in the report that we just mentioned. So starting off with just what the report is, we basically, as of April 1st, our project managers put a bow on the progress that was made during the month of March. Just pointing that out. First, we dive into the active transportation master plan. We know council's anxious to see that in front of them. We're working to get it there. So we're working now to finalize our internal review, and we'll be producing a adoption schedule in the very near future. Let's see, then moving on to Woody Way. We're coordinating now with Public Works now that spring is here. We've got some work to do at 2 intersections on Axe Handle, and then also on University in the area, Tombaugh. We hope to get some striping and some physical improvements constructed out there in the near future. Moving on to Spruce Wash. We are currently under construction in that section of the wash between Cedar and Dortha. Primarily, we are relocating utilities, which are gas lines and electric lines and phone lines. We've got some city reclaim line and water lines that we're also working with. We've recently completed the Kingman Clay intersection, which was CDBG funded. That was a pedestrian bicycle improvement, safety improvements at that intersection, crosswalk, stop signs, some enhanced drainage. We are working on our Bewley University project, which council is aware of. We are hoping to get our guaranteed maximum price in front of council on May 17th. We're working on that right now with our with our construction manager at risk. We've also completed our Canyon Terrace improvements, which was a road repair and street safety project, full reconstruct of that roadway over on the west side of Cherry Hill. That is substantially complete. Work continues on David and Hutchinson, as well as the several phases of the Coconino Estates. Several of those projects had been sort of slow during the winter shutdown period, but we're fully going back into full-on construction activities to get those projects wrapped up. We continue to deliver aging infrastructure projects for the Water Services Division, primarily water line replacements. We have one on the east side of town on Route 66, which is right there by El Paso. We are extending water line where water line actually does not exist today. And we will also be wrapping up the Huntington water line that was going on last year, took a shutdown over the winter, and then we're going to finish it up with some paving. And then we've got our library entrance. Like other projects, this project experienced some cost escalation, so we've loosened up our specifications in regard to construction scheduling. So hopefully the contractors will see that as an opportunity to reduce their price for us. Let's see, what else do I got here? Not in our report, we have excavation going on under the new ADOT bridge right out here adjacent to City Hall. That work is to accommodate the future Rio de Flag box. So we have F&F, who is the contractor who actually built that for ADOT, is actually excavating beneath that structure just to make sure that the Army Corps does not damage it in the future. Just making sure that that excavation is done now. What else do we got? Council has had recent presentations on the Fourth Lockett Cedar Roundabout as well as the Butler Widening Project. And then lastly, we began design for our Economic Vitality Group, design of a beautification project at the corner of Fanning and Route 66, kind of along the railroad tracks on the opposite side of the road from, the Jack in the Box. With that, I will offer to answer any questions council may have.
Thank you, Ms. Barrett. Do we have any questions at this time? Councilmember Shimoni.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Rick. Hi, thank you for the update. Really good read. Just a couple quick comments, Mayor and Council and Rick. Glad to see the progress being made on the ATMP. Very exciting to see that we're continuing forward with that. Rick, I'm wondering in future presentations or updates, can you include a bit about the bike pilot in regards to what next steps are and data being collected? And I just want to keep that on our radar, Mayor and Council. I know there's a lot of talk about getting data from this year and bringing it back. But Rick, can you speak to that really quick? Do you have any thoughts on when that data and update might be coming back to Council?
I personally don't, Councilmember Shimoni. Thank you for the question. Sorry for the oversight, but we'd be glad to include that in the future. I know that data is still being collected. Our maintenance team, Public Works, is right in the middle of that one with us. Our police department, of course, has been involved with emergency services. So, yeah, we have committed to providing some of that data, lessons learned, if you will, and we will make sure that that's in the report for next month.
That's great. And Sam with Streets was letting me know that they're ready to report and they got data for us. So looks like it's timely. So that's great. And then lastly, just to let Mayor and Council know, Vice Mayor, you brought up the need to have the discussion about our priorities. And I've been definitely bringing that up for a while. And City Manager and Rick and I sat down recently and talked about it as well. So Mayor and Council, I hope to see a discussion in not too long about us setting our priorities once and for all in terms of who gets priority in our design work. Is it the vehicle? Is it the bicyclist? Is it the pedestrian? Is it the transit? What is our chart? And so, Rick, I hope we can have that conversation sooner than later at the dais, and I really look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. With that, I'm not seeing any further comments or questions. City Manager.
Thank you, and thank you, Rick, for the update. Incidentally, I was downtown on Sunday and walked across the new Phoenix Bridge. It's beautiful. So thanks for seeing that project through completion. Responsive to Councilmember Shimoni's question or comments, we do have in the manager's report some updates from Public Works, including some very cursory statistics on the bike lane pilot project. You'll read in one of the bullet points, it's just there for your information. The separated bike lane pilot has resulted in 491 candlestick replacements and 19 damaged curbs. Recent snow events led to significant curb damage from the traveling public. So there's some stats anyway on some of the maintenance and repair issues. I do believe, and I'll talk with Scott Overton and Sam Beckett about this, but I do believe we'll wrap this up as time marches on and have them present to you at a future work session or at some time to give you a more thorough update on that pilot project. So thank you.
Thank you, City Manager, and thank you, Rick.
Thank you. And I'm wondering if, to conclude, if we can have Shannon Anderson come down and help us recognize some employees who are celebrating some work anniversaries.
Excellent.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. So we have the March employee work anniversaries for you today. We'll be back with April here in a future meeting. So let's switch computers here. So our 5-year anniversaries, we have one for the month of March. He's Robin. Robin works in management services under contracts and grants. So Robin is celebrating his 5 years this last month. For our 10-year anniversaries, we had Rod Leby. He works in water services with the team that you recognized earlier today with the proclamation. He is one of our analysts in water services. And then when we look at 25 years plus, we are recognizing Sharon Gonzalez. Sharon actually works in collections. She began this career in 1988 as a collections specialist. She was asked during that interview, she shared with us about collection experience, and I loved her quote, "No, but I can sell you the shoes off my feet." That really made me chuckle quite a bit. So, of course, they hired her, right? Who wouldn't want to hire someone in collections that has that ability? So she started looking for her next opportunity in the collections career. She joined our city in 1993 as a revenue collector. A couple of really unique things that Sharon's been able to do here for the city in her collections role is to serve as the city's community service coordinator for our Flagstaff Municipal Court. And she even started our first in-house collection process. So she became certified to furnish data to TransUnion directly without having to go through a collection agency. And her ability to do this actually saved the city money because we weren't paying a percentage then to that collection agency. So she's now our billings and collection manager. And again, she shared with us another great quote, which has been a privilege working with the city of Flagstaff. And she added, "It's been quite a ride." So during her downtime, she enjoys hobbies such as gardening, reading, and crossword puzzles. But she's thinking when she retires, she might become an author, similar to Councilmember Aslin, and write about her adventures here at the city of Flagstaff. So please join me in congratulating Sharon.
Thank you, Sharon. And
Thank you.
is anyone on the line, if they would like to say a few words, you're welcome to, if Sharon's there. Or... I do see Mr. Tedder.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'd like just to say a couple, thoughts. Sharon is on our line with us today. I'm one that is thrilled that Sharon took the leap and came into collection area. She's been a great employee with the city of Flagstaff for many years. And it's just amazing how she uses her passion to collect fully the amounts that are owed this city while still looking at the personal approach and fairness while working with our individuals and our customers and businesses in the city of Flagstaff. So definitely want to say thank you, Sharon, for your dedication to the city and your years of service.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rick, and yes, thank you so much, Sharon, for your dedication to our city. And it's a lot of time spent with us, and we really appreciate it. With that,
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Shannon, and congratulations, Sharon. And I think that wraps it up for the manager's report, unless you have any additional questions or comments.
I'm not seeing any in this at this time, so I think we're ready to move along to.
Thank you.
Agenda item 11, which is our state legislative update. Ms. Langley.
All right, get situated here. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Sarah Langley, Public Affairs Director. I'm also joined by Todd, our state lobbyist, online. He's down in Phoenix representing us. We're nearing the 100th day of the Arizona State Legislative Session, which is ideally when the session would begin to kind of wrap up. Unfortunately, we don't seem to be near that point yet. We are pretty far off, so we just wanted to get in front of you and provide a brief update on some bills that are still active and things that you might see in the weeks ahead. A lot of these bills may seem familiar to you, or at least the topics that they cover, because we touched on them during our February legislative update to you. However, a lot of them have had some pretty significant amendments, so we thought it was important to be aware of those, as it might, in some cases, change our position. So please feel free to share any feedback as we go through. So to jump in, we first have the Guns and Public Buildings Bill 2316. Which would only allow municipalities to prohibit firearms if we had metal detectors in place. We've opposed this bill since the beginning, and we continue to oppose it. The Joint Legislative Budget Committee recently released a fiscal note that said, or that estimated it would cost around $130,000 per entrance to staff those metal detectors. So quite an expensive unfunded mandate. It's unclear right now if the bill has support to continue, but it did pass out of the House and out of Senate Rules Committee, so we will be watching that one. The next bill to highlight is related to affordable housing, 1581. Affordable housing has been, as we know, a big topic this session, and there's been a lot of kind of interesting attempts to solve the issue. So 1581 is a bill similar to something that we saw last year from the Cicero Institute, you might remember it. The bill would give $50 million of ARPA money to the Department of Housing to create grants for cities to establish what they're calling sanctioned camping sites for individuals who are experiencing homelessness, or to create multidisciplinary homeless outreach teams. The bill notes that camping sites would be prioritized in terms of funding, but funding may also be used for tiny homes or similar low-cost structures. If municipalities did accept these grants, there are some strings attached. They must either enforce their anti-camping ordinance or show that unsheltered individuals outside of the camping sites would be reduced by at least 80%. It's important to note that this is a permissive bill, so we wouldn't need to take these grants or be involved in this in any way. It does seem to be quite far out of line with what our housing team has established as effective long-term housing solutions. However, negotiations are quite active on this in terms of the conditions that municipalities would need to accept if they took those funds. So again, we'll keep an eye on this and keep you informed. Next, I know you're all familiar with House Concurrent Resolution 2031, which as written would ask voters at the 2022 election to ban cities from setting their own minimum wage. It's unknown if this bill has enough support to continue, which is where we are with a lot of these bills right now, but it is being pushed forward by the Restaurant Association and other similar groups. There have been discussions about various amendments related to potentially just making this bill about benefits. So like, paid time off or family leave, things like that. There's also been discussion about perhaps moving the enforcement of municipal minimum wages to the state level, to the Industrial Commission. So we remain opposed to all of those amendments, as does the League and other cities in the state. So we'll see what happens there. Another big topic this year has, of course, been short-term rentals. At the beginning, there were a lot of different bills that were introduced by multiple legislatures. Right now, attention has turned to Senate Bill 1168 as a potential vehicle to kind of move forward some of the regulatory powers that cities would like to see passed this session. It's important to note that this is a very complex topic. Each city has kind of its own experience with short-term rentals, and so it's quite difficult to create a bill that would address all of those situations fairly. Currently, the bill 1168 includes a variety of proposed regulations. Most notably, it would allow local governments to stand up their own local regulatory permit, which is something that we can't do right now. Again, here, stakeholder negotiations continue and are very active, especially around the idea of a cap, so the number of short-term rentals that could be in a community, and also around a potential moratorium. So if something were to be passed this year, then nothing would be passed for a certain number of years after that. And then the last topic we wanted to discuss tonight is Tobacco 21. Raising the state age for tobacco purchase to 21 in line with federal regulations and some local ordinance such as our own. Originally, we supported a tobacco bill 2125 because it was, a very clean bill that matched our own ordinance and raised the state age to 21 without preempting local governments. Unfortunately, that bill did fail. So now attention is focused on 2505, which could be a compromise bill. We're hearing that could include a statewide retail license, which would preempt localities from having their own retail license. There may also be preemptions related to sales and marketing. So we're waiting to see what that language will be to see kind of what our position might be related to that topic. And then lastly, as I mentioned at the beginning of our update, we are, of course, quite far from the end of the session. let's see, there, to conclude a session, there has to be a budget or a spending plan in place, and we haven't heard much about that yet. There's also potential for special sessions to be called, which you may have heard about in the news as well. There hasn't been enough support to call one yet, but we'll see what happens in the coming weeks. Potential topics could include water projects, which the governor is very interested in, or discussions related to a potential repeal and replacement of last year's income tax cuts, and that would be in response to a citizen referendum, which is scheduled in November. So that wraps up our brief update. I'm happy to take any questions, and we will, of course, keep you informed as we move through the session. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Langley. Council, do we have any questions regarding our state legislative update? I'm not seeing any at this time, so thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
With that, we are down to agenda item number 12. This is the presentation and discussion regarding the City of Flagstaff Community Development Block Grant, Program Year 2022 Annual Action Plan and Staff Recommendations for Program Year 2022 CDBG Funding Allocations. And I assume this is to you, Ms. Pavlik?
It sure is. Can you guys see my screen or not quite yet?
Not quite yet.
Okay. It says it's loading. Sorry.
No problem.
There we go.
Ta-da.
Okay.
There we go.
Any luck?
We are good.
All right. Awesome. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Christine Pavlik, and I'm the Housing and Grants Administrator for the Housing Section. Thanks for your time today to talk with me about the city's Community Development Block Grant Program. So I'm here today to discuss with you staff's funding recommendations for the city's 2022 CDBG entitlement allocation. I want to first start with just a quick refresher on the CDBG program. Then I'll tell you about the application process for the 2022 grant cycle. We'll discuss the applications for funding that we received from our community partners and our internal departments. And I'll share with you the staff funding recommendations for the 2022 CDBG Annual Action Plan. I'd love to answer any questions you might have, and I hope to receive your feedback and direction on the allocation recommendations provided. And I'll be back next week when I'll request a resolution and approval for our Annual Action Plan and its submission to HUD. So the Community Development Block Grant Program provides funding for housing and community development activities. It's funded through the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD. And Flagstaff is considered an entitlement community, which means that we receive an annual allocation. And that allocation is based on a formula, and that takes into consideration things like our population, the age of our housing stock, the total congressional allocation for the program, as well as new entitlement communities that might have been added in the state or the region, and other factors that can change that annual allocation amount. The most important thing to note is that we don't have any control or influence over the allocation from HUD. So CDBG is a federal grant program, and it has a primary and a national objective. So the primary national objective of the CDBG program is the development of viable urban communities through the provision of the following: decent, affordable housing, a suitable living environment, or economic opportunity. And all of those things must primarily serve low and moderate income persons. So you, City Council, can allocate CDBG funds as you see fit based on those national and primary objectives, your own established priorities, as well as the needs we've identified in our 5-year consolidated plan. And if you'll remember, we met with you last year to formalize and submit that 5-year consolidated plan. 2022 will be the second year of that plan. So along with serving low to moderate income persons, to be eligible, an activity must qualify as one of the following. It must serve limited clientele. It must be a housing activity. It must provide an area benefit, or it must be a job creation or retention activity. So limited clientele activities benefit low to moderate income persons or those who are presumed to be low to moderate income, such as survivors of domestic violence or individuals who are experiencing homelessness. So an example of a limited clientele activity would be operational assistance for a homeless shelter. Housing activities provide or improve permanent residential structures, which will be occupied by low and moderate income persons and households. So an example would be down payment and closing cost assistance or owner-occupied housing rehab. An area benefit activity must benefit all of the residents in a low-income neighborhood. As established in our consolidated plan, the city of Flagstaff has designated 4 target neighborhoods. And what that means is that there are 51% or more of households that are low to moderate income. And so our designated neighborhoods are Sunnyside, Southside, La Plaza Vieja, and Pine Knoll. An example of past area benefit projects includes things like improvements at the Hal Jensen Rec Center and street and sidewalk infrastructure updates in La Plaza Vieja. It was mentioned during the capital improvement updates that we just finished a project that was CDBG funded in La Plaza Vieja. And job creation and retention activities are designed to create and retain permanent jobs for low to moderate income persons. We funded that activity under that national objective a few years back with our program at Sharon's Addict Thrift Store. Lastly, there's a criteria that the city of Flagstaff must follow when administering CDBG funds that at least 70% of our CDBG allocation must benefit low to moderate income persons. And historically, we're really proud to say that the city of Flagstaff has always served 100% of low to moderate income persons with its CDBG funding. So in order to continue to receive our annual allocation, the city must submit a series of documents to HUD at various times. The first is our annual action plan, which we're talking about tonight. This plan tells HUD what the city is going to do with its annual entitlement funding and how those activities are going to meet the goals of our consolidated plan. The next document is our CAPER, that stands for Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation. It's due every September, and it reports to HUD what we did with the funding and the accomplishments of our funded projects. And then every 5 years, we complete and submit the Consolidated Plan, which is a 5-year assessment of housing and community development needs. Again, that document was submitted in 2021, and it will define Flagstaff's goals for the next 5 years, or now 4 years. A fair housing plan is also required. We call that our analysis of impediments to fair housing choice, and it's Flagstaff's commitment to affirmatively furthering fair housing. Occasionally, we also submit annual action plans when needed to incorporate additional funds such as CARES Act funding for coronavirus prevention and response. So just a little bit more about our target areas. So we're able to designate local target areas for revitalization and area benefit projects. The selected area does have to be primarily residential. It must contain a high percentage of LMI households. An area of low income concentration is defined, as I said before, where at least 51% of the population has an income below 80% of the area median income. So when establishing these target areas, we also consider areas of minority concentration, which are defined as an area where the proportion of minorities, so non-white individuals, is at least 10% higher than the proportion of that minority group citywide. So La Plaza Vieja, Sunnyside, Southside, and Pine Knoll are our target areas. While locally we consider Pine Knoll as a part of the Southside community, the federal definition from HUD identifies Pine Knoll and Southside as 2 separate neighborhoods. So every 2 years with new council, the housing section establishes council's CDBG goals. And so in January of 2020, your CDBG goals were to provide housing through both rental and ownership, address homelessness, support neighborhood revitalization, as well as workforce development. And so it's staff and the ranking committee's responsibility to thoroughly review each proposal that we receive to ensure that the activity is both eligible and viable. We also conduct an agency risk assessment, and then we come to you to provide recommendations based on those ranking committee results, and then you, council, make final funding decisions. So a little bit more about what staff considers when making recommendations. Risk is really important consideration for all CDBG funds, as regardless of what the agency administers through the projects and receives its funds, it is the city that is responsible to HUD. So because of this, we take very seriously working with our ranking committee, and we take a lot into consideration. So for example, we will review the agency's past performance and success measures, their organizational experience as a whole. How long have they been a formal organization? We review their financial capacity and their potential for timeliness of expenditure. And we also ensure that the grant request is realistic. In addition to the risk assessment and to your priorities, the ranking committee also evaluates each proposal in their separate categories and scores them based on matters such as the number of people served, the agency's leverage abilities, and their collaboration efforts with other community organizations, as well as community needs that we've identified through the consolidated plan. As you're aware, CDBG does require an extensive amount of public participation, and to date, the city has held 5 public meetings. We kicked things off last summer with a meeting hosted in partnership with a League of Neighborhoods. The meeting was centered around listening to residents of our target neighborhoods and hearing about their concerns and receiving feedback on resident identified needs and priorities. City staff from community development, capital, code enforcement, and parks and recreation attended. The focus was on needs that could potentially be addressed with not only CDBG funding, but a number of other funding sources. And then our second meeting with a League of Neighborhoods was held in January. And this meeting was an opportunity for our various city departments to receive feedback on projects that they had identified for CDBG funds specifically, and that they were planning to propose for this year's funding. We have received important and robust feedback from the residents of target neighborhoods, and we really appreciate our partnership with ALN. They've allowed us, or they've really aided us in our ability to ensure that we're able to prioritize resident identified needs for CDBG funded neighborhood projects. So this year, on the 13th of January, we provided an overview of CDBG and information on the application process to our community partners. And we also started holding technical assistance meetings, which are one-on-one meetings with applicants to talk about potential projects and answer any questions they might have. And this year we met with nearly 15 potential applicants, which was quite the increase. Then we reviewed applications received at a public meeting in late February. The drafts of the draft of the annual action plan that we're discussing right now was published on our website, and it was available for public comment from March 1st to April 1st. Additionally, the housing section met with our ranking committee, and our ranking committee does include a representative from the Housing Commission, an individual nominated by ALN, who is also a representative of a target neighborhood, and as well as city staff and 3 community experts in social services and in grant making. So one of the things that we did do a little differently this year was we included some of the ARPA recovery funds that were allocated to congregate care services by council in this notice of funding availability. So in partnership with management services and the grants and contracts team led by Stacy Breckler-Nags, the housing section will be administering grants for the following ARPA recovery funding categories: the congregate care services, housing assistance, and aid to victim services nonprofits. So I just wanted to give you a little update on how those notice of funding availability and application processes will work. And so we did allocate some emergency funding to 2 different organizations under the congregate care allocations. So you'll remember you allocated $400,000 in that category. So Flagstaff Shelter Services and Northland Family Help Center were provided emergency allocations and disbursements in the amounts of about $100,000 and $76,000 respectively. The remainder of the funds were included as part of the CDBG NOFA. The total ARPA and local recovery funding that's left after accounting for those emergency allocations is a little under $225,000. So we are planning to return on May 3rd to request ratification of the grant agreement, the emergency grant agreement that we made with Northland Family Help Center, and also for consideration and approval of our recommendations for 2 additional grant agreements with Catholic Charities and Flagstaff Shelter Services. We are planning to release a NOFA for the housing assistance funding in June, with applications due back to the city in late July so that we can rank them in August. And then after speaking with a lot of the victim services nonprofits, they requested that we release that NOFA later this year, as that funding is something they'll be in dire need of the following fiscal year. So back to CDBG. Through the 2022 process, we received 6 external community development block grant / ARPA recovery fund proposals and 1 internal request for CDBG funds. 1 applicant did withdraw their CDBG application after some technical assistance. They have the intention of applying for the ARPA recovery funds from the housing assistance allocation, and we're excited to see their application for that. So we have not yet received our allocation amount from HUD, and we have received notice that it will likely not be released until on or around May 13th. So when this happens, we are able to work with an estimate, and HUD provides us with some guidance on where to go with that estimate. And so this year they have said that they think it will be, our allocation will be likely to be slightly less than our last year's allocation. So we've estimated $565,000 for the year. You'll also see that we have a large amount of program income. This is generated by the city's revolving loans, and it's comprised of returned interest-free loans from our owner-occupied rehabilitation program or from recaptured funding from our first-time homebuyers assistance program. So when someone sells their home or refinances, they pay back that loan to the city. This year's program income, as well as a small amount of reallocated funds from prior years, is a little over $277,000. So this means that for the 2022 program year, we'll have an estimated $842,411.32 in CDBG funds available to allocate into our community. So as you'll probably remember, CDBG does have two funding caps. One of these HUD funding caps is a 20% cap on administration. So as you can see reflected in this slide, we have an estimated indirect rate for the city at 10%. And I'm sure you're looking at it saying it doesn't add up. Basically, the number comes from finance and grants, and it's a calculation that takes into account our current year allocation while estimating the upcoming year's program income. So it's not exactly half of that 20%. This also leaves the city with close to $70,000 for administering CDBG contracts and to abide all federal regulations and compliance requirements. So these are items like environmental reviews and Davis-Bacon certified payroll review and fair housing requirements, as well as subrecipient reporting and compliance. And so staff is recommending the allocation of slightly less than the HUD allowable amount. We feel it's safer to budget slightly below that required cap just to give us some wiggle room. So the other cap is our public services cap. Public service funding can use up to 15% of the total available CDBG funding. Public service funding provides things like operational assistance and program support to agencies for projects serving low-income households and individuals. And this year we have estimated $95,000 to be available to fund proposals in this category. Lastly, the city of Flagstaff estimated a remaining amount of slightly over $620,000 to go toward eligible activities in the housing category. This also includes neighborhood revitalization and public facility improvement projects. So let's take a look at what proposals were received this year. There we go. So on this side, you can see the proposals received, the organization name, the project, and their funding request, as well as the proposed individuals or households to be served, as well as the application score provided by the ranking committee. So first off, the City of Flagstaff's Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Events section has requested funds for public facility improvements in the Southside community, which is one of our target neighborhoods. Improvements will include the installation of a small park and the reorientation of the parking lot, including repaving at the Murdoch Center, among a number of other needed and desirable changes. This project will serve over 1,000 low to moderate income households living in Southside. Flagstaff Shelter Services has requested funding for public facility improvements for their newly purchased motel. They're calling it The Crown. This will include needed safety improvements and will serve over 1,000 individuals experiencing homelessness every year with emergency shelter utilizing 56 non-congregate units, and that includes 12 family units. Homeless Youth Connections has requested funding for their Empowering Youth for the Future program. They want to expand on the program that we funded last year. So they're going to use CDBG funds to establish their host family program. And what this program does is it provides temporary housing for youth that are experiencing homelessness, but that need to stay in the community and need to be able to access housing so that they can finish their high school diploma program. Threaded Together has also requested funds for a program expansion from when they were funded 2 years prior. They're planning to serve 6 low to moderate income individuals with employment training skills. And this time they'll serve any low to moderate income individual that's interested. Previously, they were focusing on victims of domestic violence, but the success of that program has provided them with the capacity to serve a much broader population. Flagstaff Shelter Services also submitted a request for operations at the Crown, and that was specifically for the remaining ARPA congregate care provider funding. But because we had additional allowable funding in the public service category, and as you'll remember, the remaining funds in that ARPA allocation category was around $224,000, we've decided to include it here with these requests as well. So our recommendations are under the housing activity category, we're recommending fully funding both requests for a total of $620,411.32. And then under the public service category, we're recommending fully funding the proposals from Homeless Youth Connections, as well as Threaded Together. And then additionally, we're suggesting that the remaining CDBG public service funds be provided to Flagstaff Shelter Services for operations at the Crown. That totals that category at $95,000, which is the max allowable. The remaining ARPA funding allocated for congregate care services will also be used to fund the request from Flagstaff Shelter Services, as well as another request from Catholic Charities, which you'll learn about on May 3rd. But that amount won't fully fund this request, and so the additional CDBG funds will be great support for this new project from Flagstaff Shelter Services. So thank you for your time. I'm going to be back next week asking for an approval of a resolution so that we can submit our annual action plan. But in the meantime, I really appreciate any and all feedback and direction from council on the annual action plan and the funding recommendations. I'm going to pull those back up for us to review and discuss and answer any questions you might have. And I know Amy Hagan from PROS is also online to answer any questions specifically about the Murdoch Neighborhood Park project that was proposed. So you can see here all of our recommendations as well as the administration amount we will be allocating with the total at the bottom. So I am happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Christine. Council members, do we have any comments or questions? I'm not seeing any of this time. Oh, Councilmember Sellis. And Councilmember Shimoni after.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I have a couple of questions. Well, first of all, thank you, Ms. Pavlik, for this very informative presentation. My first question has something to do with the Murdoch Neighborhood Park improvements. So I'm hoping our PROS team is in close coordination with the Sunnyside, with the Southside Neighborhood Association, because I recall last year there was a request from the association that has something to do with the Murdoch Center, much needed renovation, including an upgrade on the kitchen to be like a training center, something to that effect of like a commercial kitchen for training and other workforce development efforts at the center.
Thank you, Councilmember Salas. That's a great question. So this project, and Amy can detail it better than I can, it is for improvements that are outside and around the building. It does not include any programs from inside. However, in the future, we would love to chat more with Southside Community Association about potential for doing improvements on the inside of the building so that it can be used for programs like that, or even a job development program or something like that. Amy, is that correct? Did you talk with Southside about those other improvements at all?
You are correct, Christine. Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. Amy Hagan, Parks and Interim Recreation Manager. Yes, the interior improvements, that's a separate conversation, and that is outside of this application that we have done for the Murdoch Neighborhood Park improvements.
Thank you. Councilmember Shimoni?
I have a follow-up. My second question, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ms. Hagan, for the answer. I just want to keep that in mind, that there's much needed improvement inside the center, including the restroom and the kitchen. On the last item, the operation of the housing as a healthcare, were there any allocation toward And I'm just kind of picking my memory here. I recall there was a conversation last year where the shelter, Flagstaff Shelter Services is needing some funding to pay the 3 motels that were occupied as temporary shelter and also as overflow shelters. So was that a different process or was that a separate application? I'm just I just remember there's still some bills to pay when it comes to operating the motels for in temporary shelter services.
Absolutely, yeah, great question. So, if you guys will remember back to, I think it was February 1st, we had on the consent agenda the ratification of a grant agreement with Flagstaff Shelter Services. We were able to provide them with $100,000 of ARPA recovery funds from that category on an emergency disbursement so that they could pay those past motel costs. We were also able to provide, with the help of management services, $50,000 in general funds. And so they were able to use that $150,000 to pay back those bills that were left over from when they were housing so many clients in the motel rooms. And so at this point, they feel that the funds from that category would be best used for the operations at the non-congregate shelter.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Shimoni?
Thank you, Mayor, and Christine, thank you for your hard work on this and the great presentation. I really appreciate all the work you and the team did in terms of public outreach and engagement, and I just thought that was so awesome. And I know that takes time and energy, and yeah, I think you all did a really good job with that. So thank you for taking the time to do that. Just a couple comments and questions. Can you just talk to me in the lens of the target neighborhoods, looking at this list? Obviously, the South Side, the Murdoch Center component, I think really hits that target neighborhood piece. But can you help me tie connections between these other items?
Yeah, absolutely. So these items are not specifically serving an area benefit. So the great thing about target neighborhoods is they create an opportunity to do a lot of neighborhood revitalization and public facility improvements. But as far as programs go, it has to provide a benefit for the entire neighborhood. And so when you're specifically serving LMI persons with job training skills or individuals experiencing homelessness, a lot of times that wouldn't be a benefit for the entire Sunnyside neighborhood. One kind of example is the food center. So we were able to use CDBG funding for facility improvements at the food center because that building is open to everyone in that neighborhood, as opposed to only serving homeless individuals. I hope that answers your question. We really work to make sure that we are utilizing funds in target neighborhoods, but we're not required to. So we are able to use it for, any program that serves the needs of low to moderate income persons. And these, the goals outlined in our consolidated plan, these programs are all in alignment with meeting those goals and the needs identified in that con plan.
Okay, no, that does answer my question. Thank you, Christine. And my other question is this in regards to the goals around decent affordable housing and housing rental and ownership, those like overarching goals. Were there any other bids that came in or proposals that came in for more like permanent affordable housing?
Not this year, no. So
Okay.
we actually, you can see all the proposals on here right now. We're funding everything that was requested. We didn't have any requests for permanent supportive housing this year. I'm thinking that there are probably a number of organizations that will request some of those housing assistance ARPA funds for the development of permanent supportive housing.
Okay, great. And when that conversation comes, I do hope we prioritize the permanent housing need. But I'm just so grateful for this list of community partners and efforts and partnership that the city is able to help with. The Crown Hotel to housing renovation effort by the shelter. It's just so exciting to be a part of that and be a partner in all this. along with every other, agency on this list, Homeless Youth Connection and Thread together, and obviously the city efforts, of course, with the neighborhood. Very, very humbling and exciting to be a part of this. And I don't have any other comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to add, Councilmember Shimoni, one of the great things about the Crown is that once we're kind of through the pandemic and the need for non-congregate shelter, that entire development will be converted to permanent supportive housing. So in a way, we're also supporting that long-term goal.
That's so great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember McCarthy and then Vice Mayor Sweet.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Consistent with Mr. Shimoni's comments, I think housing should be at the top of the list for priorities. So the Crown Hotel housing renovation, I'm very supportive of that. I guess I do question putting $370,000 into a park redevelopment. That somehow doesn't seem quite consistent with the need for housing as a priority. So I'm not going to say I would, veto that or anything, but I do have a little concern that that is a lot of money for a park. I mean, again, I'm very supportive of the things that are associated with housing, like the Crown Hotel, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember McCarthy. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I am not as familiar with the Homeless Youth Connection, and I'm wondering, the 5 host family beds, are those permanent? And can you maybe talk a little bit more about that organization? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Vice Mayor Sweet. Yes, so Homeless Youth Connections is well established in the Phoenix area, but they are new to Flagstaff. So this is their first year working up here. They were able to come up here because of CDBG funding from 2021. They are using that funding to employ a youth coach. And how the program works is McKinney-Vento, the federal law requires the school district to collect information on homeless youth in the district. They then use that information to do referrals to Homeless Youth Connection, and then that youth coach works one-on-one with those youth. They provide wraparound services, but not specifically housing services. However, they've seen a lot of success with their host family program. And the goal is to have a host family program that does 2 things. So you will have youth that are already living with maybe a friend's family, and then they would be able to get formal support through Homeless Youth Connection for supporting that youth and providing that housing. So those would be more temporary. However, similar to recruiting foster families, they'll also be recruiting host families that will continue to provide a bed, a room, a home to youth on an ongoing basis. So once one youth has moved on or has identified permanent housing, then another youth can move in. So to answer your question, it's kind of a mix of both. But the hope is to identify host families that will be available on an ongoing basis.
Thank you, that helps.
Thank you. And then Councilmember Shimoni and then Councilmember Aslan.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be quick here. I just wanted to follow up on Councilmember McCarthy's comment. I struggled, council, when La Plaza Vieja brought forward their road traffic calming needs. I remember struggling and wrestling with that for a little bit and having a lot of conversations with Jesse Dominguez from La Plaza Vieja and learning to appreciate really the roots of where the funding is coming from for CDBG and how these neighborhoods these target neighborhoods were often and are often marginalized in our efforts and not prioritized. So that's why they needed to come ask for CDBG funding to do things like streets improvements and traffic calming, of which, due to the increased rates, they're only doing one intersection, I believe, of 2, or one project rather than 2. They cut down on the scope because of the increasing cost, just so everybody knows. So personally, council, I do not struggle at all with the Murdoch neighborhood park improvements. I think it's way overdue, and I'm just grateful to see this progress and come through for that neighborhood once and for all. And I just wanted to share that with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Shimoni. Councilmember Aslan.
Thank you, and thank you, Christine. That's a lot of information you packed into that presentation. I listened to a lot of Audible audiobooks, and because I'm impatient, I usually speed them up a little bit and listen to them at 1.5 or 2 times speed. And I could have sworn at a couple moments there during your presentation, you had zoomed into 2 times speed. But I say that gratefully. I appreciate how much you were able to get out there in that short of time. I seem to remember that we set aside $400K for Flagstaff Shelter Services when we were talking about ARPA funds. And I just want to double check with everybody, make sure we're, the amount that we have here does not add up to $400,000. So you mentioned ARPA, and I just want to make sure that we're not double dipping or we're not taking the allocation that we had put through and are spreading that out in other ways somehow. I want to honor the allocation that we made earlier this year.
Absolutely, Councilmember Aslan. So I'll just give you guys like kind of a sneak peek of what we're going to be talking about on May 3rd. So the way that it worked with the ARPA funds is that while we were in the process of determining how we were going to release those funds, which are required to go through a competitive process, Flagstaff Shelter Services reached out really in dire need of funding, as well as Northland Family Help Center. And so we were able to do some emergency allocations. There is, outside of the requirement of a competitive process, there is an allowance for emergency funding in the case of an exigency or a public health emergency. And so we were able to provide that $100,000 to Flagstaff Shelter Services on an emergency basis. We were also able to provide that $75,000 to Northland Family Help Center. They're able to use that funding for payroll. They've incurred just tons of costs in overtime because they've had so many staff out sick with COVID. And then the remaining funds, which is that $224,000, Catholic Charities did request about $88,000 in HVAC, primarily HVAC, but other improvements at 3 of their shelters throughout the city. And then the remaining, I believe it's 100 and what's left after 224 minus 88, that remaining amount will go to Flagstaff Shelter Services for operations at the housing as healthcare operations of non-congregate shelters. So the way it worked is we basically fully funded that Catholic Charities request for those really crucial HVAC improvements and decided the remainder of those ARPA funds would go to Flag Shelter. However, we had this leftover CDBG funds and we thought, you know, why not give it to Flag Shelter just to kind of come closer to funding that request from them.
So we're going to go through this more in May, right?
Yeah, on May
Okay.
3rd, we
Your
will
math
come
is
back to
just
talk
as
about
quick as your.
Sorry.
No, don't apologize. It's great. I do just want to. It seems like does Catholic Charities have shelters?
Yes, they do. They have a family shelter, and then they also do housing for reentry. So individuals who are leaving prison or jail, I guess it's just jail, that need housing that would otherwise be homeless. And so there's also a permanent supportive housing program that they have with multiple locations, but the requests were for their women's reentry home and their family shelters.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Christine. I'm not seeing any further C's or Q's in the box. Appreciate all the info, condensedly packed and concise, and look forward to seeing you on May 3rd.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great night.
All right, with that, we are down to agenda item 13. This is the discussion regarding recreational marijuana social equity license program. After this, we will go on a short break before jumping into agenda item 14 regarding the Timber Sky annexation and development agreement.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Kevin Pencil, Deputy City Attorney. Just want to say hi real quick with my camera on, and then I'll switch it off and share my screen so you can see my presentation. Was my microphone on when I was just talking to you, Mayor?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
We're not seeing your screen yet, though.
Yeah, I'm putting it up right now. There we go.
Voila.
All right. So as you said, we're here to talk about recreational marijuana. We talked about this last year in about March. So we're coming back again to focus on the social equity license program. I am going to go through and provide a little bit of background, provide that overview of the act, a little bit of the history and the key provisions, and then we're going to rehash the ordinance adopted by council, and we'll cover that and can ask any questions along the way. So the Smart and Safe Arizona Act, certified as Proposition 207, passed by Arizona voters in November 2020 general election. You can see here in Coconino County, 65% of the residents in Coconino County supported it, only 35% did not. The law became effective on December 1st, 2020. So what does the act do? It authorizes the sale to adults who are at least 21 years of age. It authorizes adults over 21 to possess marijuana. It authorizes adults over 21 to possess, transport, cultivate, and process up to 6 marijuana plants. And individuals can actually grow plants, up to 12 plants, at their residence. So the act did authorize cities to take certain actions. The first one here is really what we're going to be talking a lot about today when we get into the social equity licenses. It allowed cities and towns to prohibit or limit the number of recreational marijuana retail establishments, with an exception for entities that hold a dual license. So essentially what it allowed cities and towns to do is limit the operators in their community to those dual licensees, to those licensees who hold or held a medical marijuana dispensary license and then were able to obtain the recreational retail establishment license. It also allowed cities to prohibit or limit the number of recreational marijuana testing facilities, of course, prohibit possession, sale, and use on city property, and then to enact reasonable zoning regulations. And here's what we're going to talk about later. The act also created what is known as the Social Equity License Program. And the act stated that the Department of Health Services was to adopt rules to implement the program and then issue licenses within 6 months of adopting those rules. So that's what we knew going into March of last year when we started discussing steps the city wanted to take with respect to the recreational licensor or the recreational establishments. And so the city took the following steps. The council did decide to limit recreational establishments to dual licensees. Council decided to prohibit consuming, growing, transferring, selling on city property, prohibit the use on private property if posted, and then added violations that did not carry over in the act and made the penalties consistent with the penalties already in the act. But what council did with respect to social equity licenses, knowing that ADHS was going to be adopting rules, council put that decision on pause and instructed staff to come back after those rules were adopted and discuss the issue with council for council to take action or provide direction. So that's really where we're at today. So what are social equity licenses? And then take this right from the act. The licensing program is intended to promote the ownership and operation of marijuana establishments and testing facilities by individuals from communities disproportionately impacted by the enforcement of previous marijuana laws. The act calls for 26 licenses to be issued statewide. And as I just mentioned, ADHS was going to be adopting the rules, and those rules were recently finalized, I believe in November of 21. And on April 8th, just this last Friday, they conducted a lottery for the 26 licenses. So now you have 26 individuals or entities that now hold recreational marijuana establishment licenses. Some of the eligibility requirements, just to give some people the background on these social equity licenses. One or more of the principal officers or board members, and that requires that 51% ownership, must meet 3 of the following 4 criteria. You see them here. I won't just read them off the screen, but there was an income requirement, a requirement that the individual or someone related to that individual, a close relative, had been adversely affected by the enforcement of previous marijuana laws, and the individual has to have lived at least 3 years between 2016 and 2020 in one of those areas that the department had identified as disproportionately impacted by the enforcement of Arizona's previous marijuana laws. So any applicant had to meet three of the four of those requirements. A couple other things from the rules that were adopted by Arizona Department of Health Services. With respect to transfer, that was a big question of, after the lottery or the selection of the people who get these licenses, what could they do with them? Well, there was a limitation on prospective transfer, so people couldn't agree to transfer during the application process. But once granted, the party who obtains the license is free to transfer it. So that's where we're at right now. Couple issues with the application process that people talked about. It did require a $4,000 non-refundable application fee. I think there were some concerns there because if you're really trying to impact the population, that the access to impact it was a little odd to see a $4,000 non-refundable application fee. But that was adopted as part of the rules. And then what we saw, and this was reported, I'm not the expert. I wasn't talking to Arizona Department of Health Services about this, but after reading some articles and talking to some people, there were some entities, individuals out there who were, I'll say, taking advantage of the process a little bit, trying to identify people who qualified and have them apply on their behalf. Some of those, I'm sure, were, excellent deals or fair deals for the person who qualified. Seemed to in a couple situations they were not, and looked like people were being taken advantage of. So there were some concerns there as people were talking about this program coming into fruition. So now let's talk about our ordinance. As I mentioned, council took the position of only allowing dual licensees to operate in Flagstaff. That is how our ordinance is currently written. Social equity licenses are not dual. They are only recreational. They currently are not a medical and recreational license. Thus, under our existing ordinance, social equity licensees cannot operate in Flagstaff. So if council wants to allow social equity license holders to operate in Flagstaff, it really needs to direct staff to come back with two changes. One, to remove the dual license requirement in our ordinance. That's relatively easy. It's an ordinance, first read, second read, and then 30 days before effective. The council will also have to amend the zoning regulations. That was another step the council took, if you recall. That amendment should be a pretty minor text amendment as I see it, just changing the definition of marijuana dispensary. It currently has language in there about dual licensees that would have to be removed to allow a social equity licensee to fall under that definition. But it would be, like I said, be a pretty simple text amendment, although amendments to our zoning code definitely take longer than just a regular ordinance. A few items to consider. As I mentioned, there were some concerns about whether the program was accomplishing what it was intended to accomplish. Although I think at the end of the day, as I've read up on this and talked to people about it, I think the question for council is really just whether or not the council wants to allow for additional dispensaries in Flagstaff. I don't think we're going to be able to determine, whether the person applying or whether the person or entity holding that license is actually someone that was intended. I think it could be, it may not be. It's going to be a wait and see. I think also, as I was speaking with one person, they mentioned that, the person who it was intended to impact could actually receive the license. And I was talking about transfer. They could end up selling that license to a larger dispensary or a larger corporation, and they're very valuable. Estimates $5 to $10 million, and in that, so it definitely could impact somebody that way. So as I've been thinking about this and reading about it, I think it's really that question of whether or not council wants to allow for the additional dispensaries. One thing to note, there is a push to make social equity licenses dual. If that were to happen, it really makes this issue moot. I also called Coconino County to see how they have regulated the recreational marijuana, and what I was told by one of the county attorneys or assistant county attorneys over there is that they do not currently require dual licensees. So because of that, if we were to not make any changes and somebody had a social equity license, they could essentially just go into the county right outside city borders and I put taxes here because that would definitely be one of the impacts. We have received TPT taxes from the marijuana dispensaries here in town. We currently have 2. There is one that just sits right on our border on the east side. We could see another one pop up and essentially continue, serve Flagstaff, compete with our current Flagstaff dispensaries, and we just wouldn't get any taxes from it. So it's something to consider. Another note, allowing social equity license holders to come into Flagstaff definitely fosters competition. I think on the other hand, if you currently own one of the dispensaries here in town, that competition could be seen as unfavorable to those dispensaries. So I think that's just how you look at competition generally. And that's it. That's the end of my presentation. Just looking for council direction after Councilmember Aslan's comments. I was trying to go pretty fast, so free for council discussion, and I just need that direction. Then we'll come back in the future with an ordinance if necessary and a possible text amendment.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it. Council, open up discussion. I know where I stand on it, but I'm happy to talk first, but opening up the floor here. Councilmember McCarthy.
I actually have not decided how I will vote on this if it does come back to council, but I would just like to say that previous marijuana convictions should not be a reason to get a marijuana sales license.
Councilmember McCarthy. Councilmember Aslan.
Yeah, I'll kind of share where I stand on this. I am not in favor of a future Flagstaff where there are marijuana dispensaries on every corner. I'm also not someone who necessarily will look to the power of tax revenues in my decision-making, especially when it comes to something so sensitive as this. But I will say, it sounds like because of our zoning that we would not end up with the first scenario. Which is important to me, and I would want to keep a close eye on that. And with respect to the second topic, one of the things that's really important about these TPT dollars is that they're going to our new alternative response effort, I believe. And that really factors into the conversation and the equation for me. So if we are, if that money is just going to go into the county and not be used for this alternative response effort that we have up and running and will need continuing support. And if we do not, okay, I'm getting into a run-on sentence here. Let me do a full stop and continue the thought. That would be unfortunate. And since we are also looking at a situation in which we're not really in danger of turning our heads and seeing a dispensary everywhere we look, I think I can be supportive of this moving forward and recommend, my recommendations would follow the path laid out by by legal. So that's kind of where I stand with it. I'm sure there are other nuances to the conversation. I enjoyed your pun, Kevin, in terms of getting into the weed on this or not. Yeah, let's see what else other folks have to say here. I appreciate the conversation.
Thank you, Councilmember Aslan. Vice Mayor.
I have a quick question. Do we have an anticipated date for that push on making the social equity license dual?
No, Vice Mayor Sweet, we do not. It's just something, as I was doing my research and talking to people, it was mentioned to me that that was something that was being attempted there. Well, yeah, let me back up. There was a draft bill or a bill submitted. I didn't think it was written that way, but it seems that somebody did tell me that the intent was to make them dual. I don't think that's really what it says personally, or if that is the intent, hopefully it's written better. So yeah, there may be a bill out there, but I have no timeline.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to point out a few things here. I just pulled up the voter data actually from the proposition because we had the data for the state, which was 60-40. Then from Coconino County, it was 65-35 in favor of this. Well, in the city of Flagstaff, it was 74-26. 74% of the populace voted in favor of legalizing marijuana in Flagstaff. And I think that's an important thing to note of, we can talk about tax revenue, but inevitably comes down to, are we representing what the people intended in our community by passing this proposition? I do see Councilmember Shimoni has a comment. I'll just finish up here. I am in support of the social equity licenses being included, as well as a further discussion about potentially opening up even further. But since this is 26 licenses for the entire state, our social equity licenses, they're not all going to flood here. There's Phoenix, there's Tempe, there's Tucson, et cetera. I feel comfortable with opening it up for a couple more stores, and then we can have a further discussion later on this. But yes, though it shouldn't be the paramount thing, this is tax revenue that will be lost to us if we do not act quickly. And this is a way where we can actually increase public safety. When we have situations of it being on the outskirts of town, well, we're still facing the negative externalities and by public dollars on that. So why not grasp this to improve our public safety and allow it within city limits, especially considering the voter data associated with here in the city. Do see Mr. Finsel has a comment, and then we'll go to Councilmember Shimoni.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I just want to clarify one thing or a couple things. One, you mentioned, allowing a couple in. Really, the only limitation on number would be our zoning. That's really how we would limit the number, because we have distance requirements. So, they wouldn't flood in because those distance requirements would really limit that. But the other thing I do want to point out, and we're talking about social equity licenses, even if council were to take the position that social equity licenses still should not be allowed in Flagstaff and keep that dual licensee requirement, currently, if somebody holds a dual license in Phoenix, in Tempe, they can move them. So they could, right now, we could see more come into Flagstaff if somebody decided to move their location from another area. And I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification there, Kevin. Councilmember Shimoni?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Kevin, for the presentation on this and your work on this. Yeah, I know that there's a lot of conversation about the social equity license and how they're being handled and if they're really benefiting the individuals or et cetera, et cetera. And I guess I'm not interested in getting into that level of detail because it's not somewhere that we as a council or as a city really have much say in. So, for all the reasons we've discussed, and especially with the dual license ability of coming up to Flag now and the limits with our zoning code, I'm fully supportive of us moving forward with the second, the plan to include the equity licenses, through removing the requirement of dual license and then also amending our zoning regulations to add social equity licenses. Thank you, and I look forward to future discussions on this.
Thank you, Councilmember Shimoni. And I would like to add, when this does come to it, it would be nice if we could get some kind of a visual or a better understanding what our current code is allowing. I know you have to be 500 feet or something to that effect from school zones, et cetera. So when this does get brought up to us, it would be nice we understand that zoning, and if we need to potentially modify it to reduce the locations or something to that effect, it would be good to have a little synopsis on that from staff.
Yeah, Mayor, I can definitely, I can definitely work with planning staff on that first piece, not the second piece.
Excellent. Well, with that, I think we do have direction enough to move forward, unless otherwise noted.
I think you have 3 in favor.
Yeah, I think we have 3, Mayor. I have 3.
Vice Mayor?
I'm in favor of moving it forward.
That makes 4. Councilmember Salas?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to articulate my position about moving forward with the social equity license. Well, in addition to a potential local tax revenue, state, the intent of the um, the law is also to provide statewide funding for public safety and law enforcement, which actually goes to our police and fire departments directly. So we're supporting a revenue stream for public safety, not only for Flagstaff, but throughout the state, as well as uh, really breathing life to social equity when it comes to recreational marijuana. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Councilmember.
Councilmember. Mayor, if I can just, I'm just going to jump in real quick here. What Councilmember Salas is talking about is the excise tax, and that is a statewide tax that we do receive. And it not only does it support public safety, but there's also a percentage that goes to HERF funding. So we also receive that as well.
Excellent. Councilmember McCarthy, did you have another comment?
Well, as I stated before, I'm not sure how I'm going to come down on this in the end, but I do support moving it forward to have the discussion.
Excellent. Thank you much. But I think that's 6 for 6. There we go. All right, well, I'll look forward to seeing that in the near future. Appreciate all the work on this, Kevin.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, with that, I think it's high time for a break, and then we will get into agenda item 14. So let's do 15 minutes. So that would be 5:06 sharp. 5:06. Thank you. All righty, we are back to it. On agenda item 14, proposed Fourth Amendment to the Timber Sky Annexation and Development Agreement. And yeah, welcome anyone for presenting or how we will be approaching this one.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Tiffany Antal, Senior Planner, the City of Flagstaff. And tonight I'm here to present a discussion about a proposed Fourth Amendment to the Timber Sky Annexation and Development Agreement. I do want to make it very clear that at this point in time, staff has not actually received an application and is not actually in the process of reviewing a revised development agreement at the moment. And this is just a precursor at the request of the developer and applicant to discuss a future proposed amendment. But tonight, I wanted to go through and give a history, sort of a summary of where Timber Sky is to date, where it's been, and where we are today. So in 2016, City Council did approve an annexation, a rezoning, and a block plat for the Timber Sky development, and that, of course, was done in conjunction with a development agreement. The Timber Sky development is required to have a minimum of 910 units and is allowed a maximum of 1,300 dwelling units. There's also 10.02 acres of commercial development. It's the purple you're seeing on the map. Allocated within the development. There is a provision in the development agreement, though, that would allow residential development on this site with the issuance of a conditional use permit. So it is possible that this entire development could be residential. So this is the Timber Sky block plat. This is what also accompanied the annexation and the rezoning and the development agreement. So that block plat is really broken into 17 blocks. The blocks are listed 1 through 15. There are 2 blocks, blocks 3, which is located here, and block 7, which are split on phasing lines. They're really developed as separate blocks. The point is, as those get developed together, like they're one continuous subdivision, so they have connecting roads and streets, but it was about phasing edge improvements for each of those particulars. So these 2 are falling in different phase lines. For 3B, it was the extension of this road down here, and for 7B, it was the extension of the remainder of that road as well. So the block plat was discussed that it would be developed in 4 phases. So phase 1 block plat which includes basically this corner over here, which were blocks 1, 2, 3A, 7A, and 8. That final plat for Phase 1 was approved in 2017. Beyond that block plat, then we did subdivision plats for blocks 8, 7A, and 3A, which are basically subdivided for single-family residential. Blocks 1 and 2 remain undeveloped with no development proposals currently being reviewed for those sites. Phase 2 of the block plat, as you can see here in the red line, is sort of in the kitty corner from Phase 1. It originally included blocks 5 and 6 and 7B. But this last year, when we processed the final block plat for Phase 2, it also combined Phase 3. So Phase 2 is really, when we talk about Phase 2, it's really Phase 2 and Phase 3 combined together. So it also includes blocks 3B and 4. This final plat was just approved last year. And staff is currently reviewing preliminary plats, and these are all for single-family development, for 3B, for 4, and for 7B. So, just to show you blocks 3A, 7A, and 8, these are the ones that have homes on them. So this is where the construction is. Block 3A is in the medium-density residential zone. It's 35 single-family lots. It has a gross density of about 4.6 units per acre, but the minimum density is 6 units. I'll explain this in a little bit. This block plat was done under a planned residential development. It allows it to have smaller lot sizes. So instead of the regular 6,000 square foot lots, it's got lots around the 3,000 square foot size. There were 7 land trust units per the affordability plan to be located within this subdivision. There have been about a handful of building permits. I don't have the exact number. It's not very many of lots that have been issued building permits in this subdivision, but none have been identified for the land trust units. Block 7A, also known, so Block 3A is known as Adora. Block 7A is known as, one of these is Aries and Orion, and I'm going to get it wrong. But Block 7A and both Block 8 are in the R1 single-family residential zone. Block 7A is 35 single-family lots with a gross density of 2.7 units per acre, minimum density 2 units per acre, no land trust units. Block 8 was 89 single-family dwellings or single-family lots with a gross density of 4 units per acre. This one also used the planned residential development option, so we were able to squeeze more density in on this particular plat. There are no land trust units provided in this unit as well. Unit 8, if it's not 100% built out, it's 100% sold. And Block 7A is probably 75% of the way there. So I don't know if you've ever had a chance to drive through and check it out. I recommend it. I think they're pretty, it's a pretty nice little new neighborhood. So I just wanted to talk about the original development agreement. I know you got a staff summary that sort of highlighted the different development agreements, but things that I believe are going to come up as potential amendments. This first one is in regards to densities and why I called out the densities earlier. So the zoning ordinance reflects minimum and maximum densities for each non-transect residential zoning category. Due to the topography of the property and the resource protection overlay requirements, minimum densities are based on the total gross acreage for the zoning category and not on a per parcel basis. So what does that mean? That means for each block that's in the medium density residential zone, which there's really 2, they can average the density across those 2 blocks. For all of the blocks that they have that are in single family, they can average the density across those, but only within the same zoning category. So just as a note, the density within the Timber Sky development has been difficult to achieve with only single family lots. Block 3A, which is in the medium density residential zone, was deficient in density, but this density can only be, and so it can only be made up on one other block within, per this current development agreement. So there are only 2 blocks in Timber Sky that have that MR zone. Blocks 1 and 2, which are in the HR zone, are required to provide 13 units per acre. this density cannot be achieved with single-family lots. We've tried. I've worked with multiple developers over the years trying to achieve 13 units per acre with single-family lots. It does not work with resource protection standards, with road standards. It's not feasible, and actually, if you just took the acreage alone, it's not gonna work. The zoning code, it's important to note that the zoning code was amended to change the minimum density of the high-density residential zone from 13 units per acre to 10 units per acre after this rezoning was approved. However, the development agreement for this project locks the development of this project into the previous zoning code. So I'm not able to use that now 10-acre minimum standard on blocks 1 and 2 because they are locked into a certain code. So it's just an important note. The original development agreement also covered workforce housing. So section .52 states that the project will deliver 100 residential ownership units with a minimum of 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms that will be sold at or below 100% of the AMI affordability level. These units were to be land trust units. They were subject to an affordability plan. The affordability plan these days you will see as an appendix or an amendment or a part of the development agreement. In this case, it was done separately, so it's not actually an appendix to this development agreement. The development agreement intended that the location of the units would be dispersed throughout the first 3 phases of development within the MR and HR zones. Specific lot locations are at the owner's discretion. The owner does not plan, also the agreement dictates that the owner does not plan to cluster the units, rather the owner intends to keep the units distributed throughout the blocks as feasible. So let's talk about the Phase 1 affordability plan. So we did receive a Phase 1 affordability plan as we came through and did the first plats, those 3A, that's 7A and 8. And at that time, the affordability plan for Phase 1 called out 27 units to be provided. 20 of those units were to be provided in blocks 1 and 2, and 7 of those units were to be provided in block 3A. As I've stated before, blocks 1 and 2 have a 13-unit minimum density. Land trust units need to be subdividable lots. So trying to get subdividable lots on those HR pieces will be difficult, if not possible. Amendments following the original. So there's the original, there's the First Amendment, there's the Second Amendment, and there's the Third Amendment. So really, that's 4 DAs, but technically this, if we amend again, we'll be on the Fourth Amendment. So I've skipped the First and the Third Amendments for you because really all they dealt with was the West Side Sewer Interceptor and reimbursement and so those particular DA amendments were specific to that. The only other DA amendment that addressed affordable housing on workforce housing was the second. And this particular amendment amended section 5.2 from the original agreement to adjust the AMI from 100% to 125. It also amended section 13. Basically, this created an incentive. So the city agreed to apply the 2013 engineering fees as an incentive for the provision of 100 AMI accessible units, as were described in 5.2. The maximum incentive is basically $1.6 million. 75% of the AMI accessible units were to be provided and transferred to the Community Land Trust Program prior to the first final plat approval within Phase 4. If units were not sold and transferred to the land trust, no plat within Phase 4 would be recorded until payment has been made to the city in the amount of $16,000 per remaining AMI accessible units. So we've now gone on to Phase 2. Phase 2 also includes Phase 3. A revised affordability plan was not provided for Phase 2. Staff did request several times during the process to obtain one, but one was not provided. So with that, if you should have any questions about the history of this project, I'd be happy to try and answer them for you.
Thank you, Ms. Antal. Any questions, Councilmember Shimoni?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Antal. Question for you. In exploring the land trust, was Habitat ever contacted in regards to their starter homes?
Thank you, Councilmember Shimoni. I can't speak to that. I think that's probably a question that the applicant would need to answer.
Okay, thank you. That's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, with that, I'm not saying anything else, so please, the applicant may come forward.
Oh, okay. Technology is not my strong suit, so let's get this up and then play from beginning. Okay. Mayor, Vice Mayor Sweet, again, your second meeting, members of council. For your record, my name is Lindsay Shuby. Happy to be here 2 weeks in a row talking about affordable housing with the law firm of Gamage and Burnham, 40 North Central, Phoenix, Arizona, 85004. We're excited to talk about this. We're going to try to keep our presentation and our comments brief because I imagine there's going to be a lot of questions. I'm going to kick this off. I'm here with Walter Crutchfield, who you guys know from Vintage. So he's going to make a few comments, and then I will get into the details of our request. And there are changes from what we had in the staff report. So in an ever-changing world we're in. So I'll let Walter talk for a second about Vintage and their commitments, and then I will get into the exact details of the proposal.
Thank you, Lindsay. Mayor Deasy, Vice Mayor Sweet, council members, Walter Crutchfield, Vintage Partners, I think well known to you on a number of fronts. When we began to contemplate Timber Sky in 2015 and 2016, our goal was to do something that was accessible, affordable, focused on Flagstaff residents. We have no golf, we have no tennis, we're not gated, but we tried to build a high level of amenities so that residents of the city of Flagstaff would have additional housing. In 2015 and 2016, we could have used a crystal ball because fast forward to 2022, we have a worldwide pandemic, supply chain issues, labor, construction, and now mortgage interest rates over 5%. So the world has radically changed from when we first started this. I'm grateful that you would allow this in a public discussion because I think there needs to be a public discussion about this. And I also think there needs to be accountability because I think there needs to be accountability when we're successful at what we do. And I think there needs to be accountability when we are not successful. So I would stand here tonight and tell you I have not been successful in delivering community land trust units. I'm going to start with that. I can give you all the reasons why we are where we are and delays and weather and this and that, but I'm going to start out by saying what we contemplated in delivering with land trust units and what we contemplated for affordability, we now have a development where there are homes that are selling over $1 million. I would not have contemplated that in my development career, and yet that's what we're looking at. And so the very thing we set out to do, we are in a difficult place of even being able to have that as a sustainable thing for workforce housing. It's important to make the distinction between a developer and a builder. A developer builds infrastructure, so we built 3.5 miles of sewer line out to here. We built all the roads, we subdivided we did all that work, and then we sell those lots to home builders. In every single master plan community, you look for the best home builders, you go and recruit, and you look at their projects, you look at everything they're delivering, and you say, hey, what will they do in this neighborhood? And so as we began to work and contemplate and talk about land trust, we had builders who were alongside who said, yes, we can do these things, yes, we can deliver, we can be at these price points. The main builder that we had alongside of us made a decision somewhere in there to sell his lots. And so he sold them to two parties. We also brought in Mosaic, which was a tech startup, with the idea of being able to harness technology to be able to deliver units more affordably. That is 3A, and that is where we have 7 affordable units lined up, and those come out in the last phase of 3A. We also contemplated that the land trust units would happen in the HR and MR zones of parcels 1 and 2. What we began to find is exactly what city staff has said to you tonight. Delivering land trust in non-single family is incredibly difficult because with a land trust, you're giving the land, and that's usually under a single building, and then it's in the trust, and then you have all of the affordability you're looking for. In order to get to the density requirements of parcels 1 and 2, we had to contemplate going up. Well, that becomes very difficult if third floor unit is not touching the ground, and how do we make land trust work for that sort of a thing? So we began to think about, all right, what other tools could we use to deliver affordability as we watched costs rising on single family? And so deed restriction came in because it's been used in some of the multi-story buildings to deliver fee-oriented, fee simple oriented for sale product. And we started to think about what if we added that to the community land trust. Additionally, we contemplated what are the other tools we have. About this time, we had an opportunity to talk to the affordable housing group here. They said, have you contemplated rentals? Well, we obviously hadn't contemplated rentals because in most master plan communities, as you well know, owners don't like rentals. You've faced that over and over and over in Flagstaff. And so it wasn't something we contemplated. We then came to the place of saying, maybe that is a direction we need to go. So as those conversations went along, the idea of low-income tax credit, 60% AMI housing came up, and could we utilize rentals on parcels 1 and 2? So we walked away from that discussion, and I began to look across the whole country to find out who are the developers that are out there that are delivering quality, affordable housing in the low-income tax credit world. Not just getting it done and turning it over, but delivering quality so that you could truly build a community where there were affordable rental units in the shadow of million-dollar houses, which is not typically what gets done. But we felt this is a good community value, and this is a good opportunity to try to meet this need. As we went through that, we came back and said, well, what if we had land trust? What if we had deed restriction? And what if we had low-income tax credit as 3 tools? That caused us to come forward and say, well, let's take the 100 units and expand that to 160 and see if we can add those other tools in order to deliver the affordability that we contemplated 6 or 7 years ago. So in that process, we identified Roar's development out of Minneapolis. They've done numerous low-income tax credit housing all over the country, and we think it's high quality, and we like who they are. They have met with the city. We have entered into escrow with them on parcel 1. We have discounted the parcel almost $3 million so that we could recruit them in to bring low-income tax credit housing and meet some of the demand for affordability. We are currently in that process, and now Lindsay's going to give you the specifics of what we're talking about.
Walter, thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to follow what Tiffany did. She did such a nice job kind of bringing the history and explaining the densities. What Walter's saying in terms of, I don't have to explain to you what affordable housing is. You guys have a phenomenal housing group. I actually was on one agenda where you got a very long presentation on all. I felt way smarter in terms of housing after Sarah and Justina and everyone gave their presentation. The problem is home ownership is absolutely the American dream, right? That 100 CLT units would be lovely. I'm actually Canadian, so we'll call it the North American dream. I'm Canadian and American. But we have to acknowledge the reality of where we're at. and the construction costs have just skyrocketed. Again, as Walter said, no one would have predicted the popularity of your community as being, recognized as one of the best Zoom communities and everyone wanting to come live here. And one of my favorite lines that I like to quote all over the state is Dan Folk and his competing community interests. And we've got a lot of competing community interests here, right? We've got home ownership, that's lovely, and that's a goal. But another amazing community interest is having a 60% AMI affordable rental project in the same community as market rate rental. Because we've got the single family for rent at Sky Cottages. We're gonna come forward with another piece on the 13 acres. We're not gonna talk about that now. But in the same community and subdivision as a $1 million house. They all use the same dog park. They all use the same pickleball courts, and to all be in the same community. I think that's another ideological goal that we can achieve here tonight. And because we know, whoops, went the wrong way. Because we know that 100 units would be better, 100 single-family homes, that's why we upped the ante to 160. And we are asking for rental, deed restriction, and community land trust. The minimum of deed restricted and CLT would be 100% AMI, and the minimum for rental units would be 60% AMI. To be fully transparent, and again, so happy we're here in a public forum, it's likely that we'll do all 160 as rental. And I'm gonna get into Roars and show you on the map where Roars is going. We're in escrow. We're very excited and very likely will deliver 160 rental units. But I would love to have 2 more tools in our toolbox in case deed restriction or CLT become an option and we don't have to come for another amendment. In addition, and this was not in your staff report, hot off the press, Walter, after having some meetings this morning, is also would like to offer 10 single-family residential lots in Phase 4 to Housing Solutions of Northern Arizona or another nonprofit. Again, as Walter described, the conundrum between being the developer and the home builder. Walter's not a home builder, but we will give 10 lots that will serve a home, a minimum, maximum, or approximately 1,200 square feet, and we'll stub the utilities to it. So that's in addition to the 160. This just came off this morning, so we're all learning together. Again, the ideology here and the competing community interests that we get to achieve is a diversity of residential typologies and incomes all in one subdivision. Again, it's not what we thought at the beginning, but maybe we're meeting another goal. So block 1, and Tiffany did a really nice job kind of explaining the phasing, but we have a developer in escrow. So this isn't, we intend to, we want to. Walter is offering block 1, for 50% of what he would offer to a market developer, and we're in escrow. This is a 4% LIHTC, or it's not LIHTC, it's a 4% project, which means it doesn't go through the 1-year annual review from the state housing. They have the bonds and the credits ready to go. They can get a shovel in the ground. They have come to meet with the city. I believe they met with Justina from Housing and Planning. They are very excited to be in Flagstaff. They've wanted to be here, but they can't come unless a developer gives them a cut on the land price, which is what Walter's willing to do in order to meet this obligation. So, proposed amendment number 2, and Tiffany touched on this, so I'll just say it. The density is calculated, our request, so right now you're allowed to transfer density between same zoning categories. We are requesting that the density be reviewed by the overall Timber Sky project. No individual block can exceed the maximum as required in the Timber Sky development agreement. So that's on density, and Tiffany touched on that. We can ask if you have more questions. Proposed amendment number 3. When we originally spoke to staff and when we brought this forward, we were asking to delete the penalty. We're taking that off the table. We believe in our commitment to Roars and the ability for them to develop. So if we do not produce 160 units in phases 1, 2, or 3 then we will pay the $1.6 million fee. So penalty fee, whatever, best penalty is a better word. So I left this in here in terms of, because it was a proposed amendment that you saw in your staff report. It is off the table. We are not asking council to support that this evening. And we still will have a contractual obligation to bring forth 160 units, plus a penalty if it's not done in phases 1 through 3. Last one, it's a cleanup item. Delete the water fees. They're no longer necessary. If council's willing, this is a Christina Rubakova and Lindsay lawyerly. If it's no longer relevant, let's take it out of the agreement. But it's just no longer necessary. And then that was something that we agreed to as staff in terms of, no longer necessary. So with that, I am certain council, mayor, vice mayor, council, you're gonna have a ton of questions. We look forward to answering all of them. We understand, we acknowledge, and we admit that this is not the original project that brought in front of you. But in the short time I've gotten to know your planning director, she has another line that I like, which is the truth changes. Who would have guessed? Who would have guessed that we would have all these people virtually and that we did our presentation last week with the architect and it was so seamless and it was great. So there's some good things and bad things that have come. And the reality we're in now, we've got a bird in the hand, and we are respectfully requesting council, whether you're here in person tonight or Councilman Trimoni, Councilman Salas, council member online, we're respectfully requesting your support in your request to work with staff to move this forward and to get you a development agreement with the changes outlined, excluding the removal of the penalty. So with that, I stand for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Shuby, and thank you, Walter, for coming to us and making this a public forum. I think this is extremely important for the public to be aware of and what's going on and happening and roadblocks that have occurred, and ensuring that this isn't something that's just decided in executive session. So I appreciate you being forthright on that. But with that, I'm going to open it up to our public participant first before we get into the discussion. Devonna McLaughlin, if you'd like to come up.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My name is Devonna McLaughlin, and I have the honor of serving as the CEO of Housing Solutions of Northern Arizona, a local nonprofit housing provider. And I get to see in my role the need for affordable housing on a daily basis. We have folks working with us to access down payment assistance programs, to open the door to homeownership, your employees at the city of Flagstaff who are struggling to buy a first home to make it here in Flagstaff and stay here in our community. We know the Acona survey data says 54% of our employees are considering leaving town because of the lack of affordable housing. This is a dire emergency that we need to focus on. And I appreciate the request from Vintage to change the development agreement. I appreciate the increase in the units that are being proposed to be affordable. However, as you consider this request, I hope you'll consider a few things. In the last 5 years, since the first development agreement was approved, we've seen a focus from council to increase affordable housing resources. There have been 339 affordable rental units approved for development in that time. StarPoint, a low-income housing tax credit project, will create 69 affordable units coming to market this season. The villas on Lake Mary were awarded tax credits in 2021 for 76 additional units that are working to move forward through the development process. And you all heard about Foundation for Senior Living's proposed project downtown, which will provide another 70 units. That doesn't include what you guys have negotiated private sector to developers to provide to serve households up to 80% AMI that are currently in construction or coming forward. During that same amount of time, there were 34 units of affordable ownership housing units approved. And you can see that there's a distinct disparity. And the reason for that is simple. It's easier and more financially feasible to create affordable rental housing. The need for affordable ownership opportunities and the ongoing significant investment in affordable rental is needed, but I respectfully request that council hold the developer to at least some of their promises and specify in the development agreement how many units will be ownership and how many will be rental. Please do not leave that open for the developer to decide what is financially feasible, because the easy answer is a 4% bond deal that will create tax credit properties. And yes, they serve 60% AMI households, and that's wonderful, but we also need an investment in ownership. I also respectfully ask that the DA clearly outline how those ownership units will be built, and to not rely on third-party for-profit builders to meet that obligation, because we've seen that not come to fruition so far. Finally, I respectfully request that the low-income housing tax credit developer, 4% bond dealer, not dealer.
Sorry, what were you saying?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
That we all know that tax credits come to an end, and they provide a longer-term affordable housing period, which is great. And it could be 15 years for the IRS regulations, or the Department of Housing might require 30 years. But at the end of that time period, they become unaffordable. They could be sold, they could be converted to market rate. And so I ask for the possibility of creating a first right of refusal on that property, so that the city or its designee may be able to step in and keep those units to be affordable in the future, so that it's not just a time limit of affordable housing, but perhaps it could be a long-term or perpetual investment in affordable housing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Devonna. And I don't see that we have anyone online. Am I correct on that for public participation? All right. Well, with that, I'm happy to open up the floor to council for questions, comments, anything of the above. McCarthy, you got this? Councilmember Aslan. Yep.
Thank you all very much. Really appreciate the conversation. Things are changing quickly, and everyone's trying to react and reorder things. I very much appreciate that. There was one comment, Ms. Shrub, about who would have ever anticipated that Flagstaff would become such a destination for remote living. And I was sitting up here thinking to myself, oh, well, I did. You know, I've been up here for almost 4 years, saying it over and over and over again in the face of other thinking that we will never build our way into affordability in Flagstaff. It won't happen. The supply and demand curve will never allow for it. Every time we build a house, we're seeing them be worth $1 million now. That's not going to change. So I just wanted to react to that real quickly. And I also, I'm hoping Ms. Rubalcava is on the line. You invoked her name by talking about the water fees issue. And I just real quickly wanted to hear about that specifically from her perspective, and give her the chance to weigh in on that. Do we have to summon her somehow with the chant? Or?
Ms. Rubalcava, are you on with us tonight?
Mayor and Council, this is Sterling Solomon. I understood that she was. Let me double check on that.
Yes, I'm sorry. This is Christina. I had to find a quieter spot so I could answer you. I did miss the last part. Do you mind repeating it?
Oh, the question?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so just a few moments ago, Ms. Shrub was mentioning that you'd like to tidy up the language a little bit by removing the water fees. And she was just mentioning in passing that that was something that the two of you agreed to. And I just wanted to, I have no reason to doubt that. I just wanted to give a second chance for you to sort of speak to that.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So when we had originally drafted the DA, we did not believe at the time that we had sufficient capacity to serve the development. And so one of the requirements that was written into the development agreement was that the developer would advance those water capacity fees so that we could develop the capacity. And then as those homes were being developed, we would credit basically the fees that had paid in advance. But what has since happened in the interim is that we have had the funding to go ahead and create that capacity. And so we'll just go ahead and collect our fees in the ordinary course. We don't need to advance them. That's simpler. That's our ordinary process. And so we had already agreed to do that administratively via a letter that our previous water director had signed. But if we're going to go ahead and do any work to the DA in terms of an amendment, we can go ahead and clean that up just for clarity's sake.
Yeah, Councilmember McCarthy.
So, Christina, are you saying that the developer will still pay the fees? They just don't have to pay it up front? Is that correct?
Absolutely. It's only a timing issue. We just don't need them early anymore.
So there's no just to clarify then, there's no net loss to the city in terms of what, what we're putting in. Okay.
Yep, that's correct.
Well, I'm glad I asked, and thanks for being able to weigh in on that. I appreciate you being available on the call here still. That's my only question for right now. I do want to just share some default thinking here. Actually, let me formulate my thoughts here for just a second, and you'll swing back to me, if that's okay.
Certainly. Councilmember Shimoni, you had a question earlier, if you wanted to revisit that or jump in here as well.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Lindsay and Walter, for your time today and your presentation. Sorry I'm not there with you in person, but it's good to be with you. So yeah, gosh, hearing about the history and everything, it's so promising, right? 100 workforce housing for residents of Flagstaff. The ability to own a house and land in Flag, build equity, call Flagstaff home, not for 15 years or 30 years or even 60 years, but forever. That is such an amazing gift and deal that we had agreed on. And the issues with land trust span way long before the pandemic. I'm sure Lindsay, you and Walter both know this and understand this. It's an issue of the lending and the struggles with lending is my understanding. But my question, Mayor and Council and everyone on this call is just that, I'm wondering from our housing experts at the city, if someone from housing can speak to the proposed DA and in your thoughts through the lens of our housing needs, what are your thoughts about the proposed DA? Does it meet the mark of the 100 residential units that were originally proposed? Is this a fair trade-off? I have my own thoughts, but I'll wait to hear from staff first. Is there anyone from housing on the line?
Sarah Dar, are you
Mayor
tuning
and
in with
Council,
us?
Sarah Dar.
Thanks.
I am. I'm right here. Thank you, Mayor and Council, and thank you for the question, Councilmember Shimoni. It's not staff's place to weigh in on the fairness as you specified, but I can speak to, of course, the community needs within the housing arena, and we need both. We need rental housing and we need homeownership housing. The information about the units dedicated to either Housing Solutions or another nonprofit is new information to us as staff. So I've had an opportunity to digest and or weigh that. If that moves forward, if that's council's direction, I would respectfully request that. Javon's word stuck in my head. Respectfully request that. We codify that there are specific parameters put in the DA to ensure that those units are completed within our community. We follow your direction. We are supportive of the concept of rental. We are supportive of the concept of homeownership. I feel the feedback we've gotten from the community over time is that it is desirable to have those land trust units. You're right and also wrong, Councilmember Shimoni, as far as financing goes. They are financeable. We've sold 50 of them in our community. We've resold quite a number of those. Typically, they are not financeable or they're not desirable by mortgage brokers because they sell off the mortgages. They are often financed by financial institutions that keep those loans within their own portfolio. So we know it's a successful product. We've had a number of resales within our community. I am sympathetic towards the changed market conditions. At the very same time, those market conditions have just moved homeownership even further outside of the reach of those members of our community desiring to be homeowners. So we stand as staff to follow your direction, but given the new element of the land trust units in here, perhaps coming forward, we would need some time to pin down some details surrounding them.
Okay, thank you so much, Sarah. And so, Lindsay, a couple quick questions for you and Walter. Have you all reached out to Habitat for Humanities at all in town about their starter home land trust program?
Yeah. Mayor, Vice Mayor, Councilman Shimoni, we have not. Walter has spoken to Devana, and that's a conversation that we've had. You know, our bigger issues, you know, we see challenges with CLT, but our bigger issues now are just the affordability to construct them. And so right now in the development agreement, the city is entitled, or the Vintage, I was gonna say Walter, Vintage and his partners are obligated to construct 100 affordable homes at 125% AMI or less. That's the obligation right now. What we're presenting today is 170. 160 rentals at 60% AMI or less, and then 10 lots. And we know that we're gonna have to, and so as opposed to putting the obligation on the developer to build the home, because I heard what Ms. Dar said, and she's right on in terms of making sure there's specific obligations, but 170 as opposed to 100. And
Lindsay, I'm sorry, that leads to my other question. Okay.
Councilmember Shimoni, I just want to add to what Lindsay just said. I think what we recognized going in with the massive move up of construction costs, that in the community land trust, when we sell lots, we give those lots to the builder. So the builder gets a land trust lot at zero. So that's all I can do as a developer. They get a lot, it costs them zero. They then deliver a product on that. What we're seeing is that even them at their cost, it's not going to come in at anywhere near the affordability that people have in mind. It's probably in the high fives. That's going to exclude a whole bunch of people that are waiting to buy homes. What we did not consider when we started was the nonprofits. The nonprofits have way more tools. They have federal grants. They have down payment assistance. They have all kinds of things they can bring on top of construction. So when they get the lot, they can do the construction just like the private builder, but then they can go to the federal government and get all kinds of other tools to lower the purchase price and get it into a position where it's affordable. And I think when we started as master plan developers, our view was simple. Go find the best builders, put this together, bring that to them. Nobody anticipated an environment where construction costs have, in the last 12 months, gone up 70%. So we're trying to figure it out. It isn't perfect. I started this out saying, this is where I failed, but here's what we think we can do to try to solve it today. And in the conversation with Devana this morning, she pointed out the failure for well over an hour, and I was glad to hear it because I deserved to hear it. And so I do think—
Walter.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. There's a little bit of a lag, and so I apologize. But so let me ask you this, and I appreciate your working with Devana and the community and our team to figure this out, and I want to figure this out with you all. So the 160 units that's going to be LIHTC, is that for 60 years? Do we have a year confirmation?
That has to be, again, not going to get in the middle between the developer and the delivery system. The conversations I've had with ROARS is the state requires 15. They amend that to 30. That's as far as I've had. They've had no other conversations with the city. And so that would be a conversation between the city and the actual builder. I can't.
So Mayor,
We can go to 30.
Mayor and Council, I guess my comment to us all is just that for me, if we're doing LIHTC, it needs to be 60 years. We've done that with other projects in the past in the city, that affordable units were going to be permanently affordable for 60 years. And then I think we need to definitely pull in Habitat and see, because Walter, if you were going to give up 100 units prior to be used as land trust, now you're giving up 10 plus the. It's a start, but I think we can build upon it a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Ms. Starr, did you want to jump in here real quick?
I did, if I may. I wanted to endorse the idea Devonna put forth during her comments surrounding the right of first refusal. The financing on tax credit deals, whether they are 4% or 9% credits, are incredibly complex. And my understanding is that Roars, who has already met with city staff, already has the credits lined up. Throwing a spot of doubling that number of years of commitment could jeopardize potentially, I'll let them speak for themselves or let Lindsay speak on their behalf, could jeopardize funding, because that's a commitment further out than their performers are going to show. However, that right of first refusal or another mechanism where there is an ability to extend that affordability is something that can be dealt with at the end of the 30 years. Quite often at the end of 30 years, multifamily units have reached somewhat of the end of their useful end of life, given the wear and tear on rental units, with the number of turnovers that will occur within them over time, et cetera. And additional money is necessary to sustain those units as safe, decent, affordable housing. There'll be required updates. Who knows what our technology is in 30 years, what needs to be incorporated into the units, et cetera. So while I hear your desire for a 60-year commitment, if council's desirous of moving forward with this DA amendment, we may come back to you with some other suggestions of how that may be able to be accomplished without jeopardizing the credits that have already been awarded. I also wanted to make sure that I did not sound not supportive of the concepts being presented this evening in my earlier comments. Housing staff is supportive of bringing all kinds of different affordable products to the community, and just await council's direction on what the details should be. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Starr. Councilmember McCarthy.
I'm just trying to understand your proposal. Is it that 160 units would be affordable rentals? Is that correct?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, Councilman McCarthy. Our proposal is that 160 units could be rental, could be CLT, or could be deed restriction. I am saying in interest of transparency, they are likely rental. I would want you all to feel comfortable.
And they're affordable rentals, is that correct?
60% AMI or less.
Okay, and then the other 10 lots, those are land trust units for ownership, is that correct?
So, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Councilman McCarthy, as Walter described, again, we did, and I wasn't part of the original one, so I can say, they all made mistakes.
Well, it doesn't matter what the original one
I know,
is. I
but-
want to know what your proposal,
For
what are you proposing for those 10 lots?
That we donate 10 lots to a nonprofit, and they do it. That we provide a lot that's roughly graded, that has utilities stubbed to it. So if a nonprofit would have to agree. Our thought is that the nonprofit has more tools than a private developer does.
So this nonprofit could make them land trust units for ownership, or they could do other things that make sense to the nonprofit.
Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Rasslin.
Thank you. Real quick. Sorry you got up, Walter. You may be able to speak to this yourself. So if we're talking about those 10 units going to a nonprofit, how do we decide what the nonprofit is? I have every confidence in Devonna and her team over at Housing Solutions, but I think we'd all be more comfortable if this was a process that was a little bit more inclusive or competitive or involved in terms of how to apply and who gets awarded. that. So can you speak to that at all? Have you put any thought into that? I'd hate for this to be some backroom deal that happened across a cup of coffee on a random Tuesday morning.
Yeah, at the Toasted Owl. Mayor Deasy, Councilmember Aslan, the conversation that we had, and I think sort of the epiphany was, you know what, you're right. The nonprofit has the ability to do things. The nonprofit I was having the conversation with was Housing Solutions. And to be fair to Housing Solutions of Northern Arizona, that's a consistent statement they've made all along, back 5 years ago, that nonprofits could do it. I think as a developer, I looked at it, having developed hundreds of acres of master plans, thinking, yeah, that's never been done. I'm not risking that. Fast forward to 2022, we're looking at it saying, why not? Now, the difficulty is if we say, let's do it in this current phase, then I have to pull lots. 3A would be the specific area. I would have to pull those lots out. And then to be fair to the development agreement, the HOA and the CC&Rs, that they would then have to deliver the same house. They'd have to get the plans from that builder delivered and then bring all of the tooling onto that. That's difficult. It's difficult for them, and it would be difficult for the process. So that puts us into, well, then let's do it in phase 4 because we can plan for that. But that puts it way out. So I'm pushed to, because I want to deliver affordability. If we do it now, it creates some real difficulties. If we push it out, I think there is an opportunity then to say, okay, what's the process? Here's the 10 units. How are we going to do this? I mean, you're asking a question that was not contemplated up to this. It was more important to us to go, here's 10 units, which we can codify and we can put them out there and they're there and everyone knows them. And then who does it? I think that's to be determined. And I actually think Sarah's team really has to weigh in on that to say, here's the best way to do that.
Thank you. Ms. Dyer, you have a comment?
Thank you. Mayor and Council, the tool that can be utilized within the development.
Sorry, you're breaking up there a bit. Could you repeat that? Sarah?
A third-party developer, specifically
Yeah,
a
could
nonprofit.
you, sorry, you were breaking up there. Could you start over again, please?
Yep, I'll start over, and if I lose you, I'll just come back to. Well, we can utilize within the development agreement.
Yeah, my apologies. If you could come back, I have some questions as well, so we can circle back when you're in a better reception area.
By the nonprofit.
I heard nonprofit. That's the only word I got so far. Sarah, we'll circle back to you. We're having troubles on our end hearing you. So a few questions on my side. So what I'm hearing though through this is that the 160 units will be done for the phase 1, 2, and 3, correct? So therefore, that's how we're not needing to do that 1.6 mil request waiver or adjustments. So that will be 160 units. Are these units going to be in one big building?
Mayor, so correct on your first question, we will do them in 1, 2, or 3, and if we don't, we pay the penalty. We're
Right.
leaving the penalty in there. Correct, Roars would do it in one building. I think you can ask the staff who met with Roars. It is at the entrance of Timber Sky. So it was very important to Walter that he found a great developer with a high level of quality because this is the entrance to the development. They are in one building. However, they have access to all of the same amenities as any other homeowner in Timber Sky. So the high amenity package that we have in terms of, like we said, the courts and the dog park and all of those things, they're all together. The other 10 units would be scattered in phase 4 and not all together.
Thank you. And what, when we're looking at those 160 units, is there anything in there for number of 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, the size of it? Because the other thing is, you know, if we're, yay, we get 160 units, but they're all 450 square feet, then that doesn't help us as much as getting the 2 bedrooms and so forth that could support a low-income family.
Agree. Mayor Deasy, I don't have those details, but we can share them with council. The intent is for a variety of different sizes. And as you know, I know the tool that you guys have in your ordinance to amend development standards in order to help get some more units in there. Our goal is to get way more than 160. I hope that we can come back and say there are more, but 160 is a contractual obligation that I want everyone to meet their goals. So as you know, developers want as many units as possible on that lot 1, working with topography, working with resources, working with different incentives. Staff has already come to the table. Roars was wildly impressed with the meeting with with Justina from Housing and Planning, trying to talk about different incentives to get the greatest number of units in that block. They submit at the end of this month. Okay. And they plan to submit on April 26th.
Excellent. For the 4% with
No.
the state, or
Mayor,
that's already been
they
secured?
already have the 4%.
That's already been secured.
They plan to
Okay.
submit concept plan to you.
Okay.
So through the city planning process. And correct, Tiffany said we didn't have an application for a development agreement. I did not want to be so presumptuous as to submit for an application for a DA amendment until we had this conversation. If there's no will of the council for our 170 units, then there will be no application that's put in. But we're very hopeful that we get to move forward on a solution tonight. And you'll get an application tomorrow.
Thank you. And I do see Sarah Dar is back in a better reception area. If you'd like to jump in and try again. Sarah.
Thank you for your patience, council. Today did not go at all as I planned, so I am parked in Cordish Junction. What I was trying to say earlier is that there is a tool we can utilize within a development agreement should council wish to go that way with 10 land trust or permanently affordable units, and that is we can specify that those units will be the responsibility of a third-party nonprofit. We would not be in the chain of title on those lots. It wouldn't be that they come to the city and then go to a nonprofit, that it would be the developer's decision on who to work with. That is typically their process. If it is something where the developer has decided who their nonprofit partner is, that can be specified within the DA, or in the DA we can set a time frame in which that nonprofit needs to be identified to ensure that that continues moving forward. So we do have a tool to get there, identified or not, should you wish to move forward.
Thank you for the clarification, Sarah. Councilmember Shimoni?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of follow-ups since learning about the 30-year concerns that Sarah brought up. So if 30 years is the time frame that we're working with and we can't push for more, then I do think that we definitely need to put in the first right of refusal into that agreement with the 30 years of the LIHTC project. And Lindsay, I just want to say to you and Walter, thank you for putting this at the entrance. I had concerns this was going to be tucked away in a back corner, and I'm grateful that this is front and center. But I am also a little concerned about it all being kind of in one clumped place that we're putting all these units. Now, I know we're doing 10 additional is what we're talking about in phase 4. And so again, my point, Mayor and Council, is if we're going to do, I totally support us doing the LIHTC. And if 30 years is what we can get, that's what we can get. But in terms of the units for phase 4, Walter and Lindsay, I'd be very interested in seeing us increase that number to, let's say, closer to 40. To me, that seems more like an equitable trade for 100 permanent housing opportunities for our community members, 40 units for land trust, and the 160 units at 30-year, LIHTC rentals. Lindsay or Walter, do you have any thoughts about increasing that number to 40?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, Councilman Shimoni. Walter, at the end of the day, is going to have to answer this question, but one thing that's important to know is that this all impacts the balance of the affordability. There's only so much money, and if we're discounting block 1 50% to allow for this to happen, the more lots that we give, the more the prices go up for the other lots. And so they're just, again, competing community interests. You guys have a housing crisis, you have sustainability crises, and they are all important, and they all play a role. But when a developer gives more, the cost goes to someone else. And that's just what's tough. And that's the balance that I'm gonna respectfully request that you guys, and again, the fiduciary responsibility to his investors. I don't know if Walter did this by himself, he'd give you everything. He's got partners in fiduciary responsibilities. So what we have authority to request tonight is the 160 at 60% AMI or less, which I think will really help. There's huge wait lists, as far as I understand, at least at Foundation for Senior Living, there's 500 people on the wait list. And that's a real crisis, and we can get a shovel in the ground right away for those 160 units. And then for the 10 lots, I understand that Devonna and her group did 11 lots last year. What we have on the table right now, which we believe is a strong offer, is the 160 rental and the 10 more in phase 4. And I appreciate Councilman Shimoni, you continue to ask, and that, you don't get what you don't ask for. As I've taught my kids that. But at the same time,
That's right.
There is a reality of where, the rubber hits the road in terms of affordability. And as much as, again, we're discounting block 1 by 50%. So we don't have to knock every block out of the park on this one at all, but there also is just realities.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what Walter thinks. There's 100 permanent units versus LIHTC with 10 is just not the same.
Mayor Deasy, Councilmember Shimoni, Lindsay accurately points out the fact that any developer has multiple competing interests. And we're fortunate that we have investors that are patient and believe in the things we believe in and answer to things that are much higher than this. But we've sat down and laid this out. The discount on parcel 1 is almost $3 million. When you add that with the 10 additional lots, we feel like that's reasonable. In the end, and nobody here cares, and that's fine that nobody cares. We still haven't broken even on this development to pay our developers back. So this idea that somehow we roll in and we're rolling out with bags of cash, that's not how Flagstaff is, folks. I'm very thankful that we're beloved all over the state of Arizona, and we deliver projects around the state of Arizona because that pays for us to be in Flagstaff. It's more expensive to build here. It's a difficult environment. We do the very best we can. We've invested $25 million into ADOT's location, the moving of the Harkins, giving you a new road system for Beulah and University, and as of yet, don't have a project that's saleable there. That's nobody's issue here, but it does speak to our willingness to go deep, to do the things we promised that we'll do. We delivered those projects without having revenue tied to them, and in this case, we're doing the very best that we can. This is not a negotiated thing. Again, I started this whole conversation with, I know what we promised in 2015 and 16. I know what's happened in the market. So the land trust only works. I would say the land trust works in many, many applications. Where it's very difficult is in production, new home building. That's where it is struggling. And it isn't just struggling here, it's struggling all over. So Councilmember Shimoni, again, I appreciate you and I have a long history of asking and asking. You asked a difficult question the other day on traffic, and we're trying to have the conversation. In this case, the best information I have and the best agreements I have on all the fronts, we feel like this is a reasonable and a fair offer.
So Walter, you're saying 25 is possible?
Oh, Mayor Deasy, Councilmember Shimoni, the offer we
I'm not
have is
kidding.
the offer we have is the offer that's on the table.
Mayor and council, I personally struggle with that. I like to sleep on it personally. I just don't know if 10 is really hitting it for me. But I'll be quiet now. Thank you.
Councilman McCarthy?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to bring up something related to this. And this is the flood mitigation, I guess we'll call it, the pond that you were going to build. And Walter, as you probably remember, I voted no on that. And the reason I did is I didn't like the fact that it was wasting water, which is a real premium up here. I understand that you're willing to make a dry pond. In other words, it won't be filled with water. So I'm very glad to hear that. I'm very supportive. Thank you. As far as what we're specifically talking about tonight, I learned a long time ago, I don't promise votes ahead of time, but I will say that I am very interested in this and very open-minded about it. And I would like to hear the specifics and have time to study all of the details. But I'm hoping that we can come together on this, and I think we probably will. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember McCarthy. Well, Councilmember Aslan?
Well, yeah, I'll just kind of conclude my thoughts here. I was going to say something at the opening, and then my tongue got tied, so I'll just sort of end with what I was going to begin with. It echoes what Councilmember McCarthy has said. You know, I'm open to this. I have always believed that what we're doing here is about the art of the possible, and I don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the possible. I do think there's a little bit of wiggle room, and I always appreciate the spirit of negotiation that Councilmember Shimoni brings to these events. I would like to see more. I did want to say I do think that there should be we should have the right of first refusal. And you know, I just want to give voice to the struggle that we're all facing here of trying to create affordable units in Flagstaff. The affordability issue is not something that's unique to Flagstaff. It's not something that's unique to Arizona. And these are problems that are heavy, and they're bigger than the tools that we personally have here at the local level to fully appreciate or to fully tackle. I think a part of doing what we must is doing what we can, and it feels to me, I just want to acknowledge out loud that I feel like we're working with partners in good faith. I don't know you, Walter, but I do appreciate the history that you've had in Flagstaff and your ability to be nimble and to be receptive and to evolve. And I also appreciate, you know, that you may feel a little frustrated coming into Flagstaff to do some of these things. This should be hard. This should be really hard for you. Growth and development should not be something that is an entitlement. And at the same time, we do need to grow smartly. We do need to continue to provide units and equitably. One of the things I'd like to hit upon that I'm getting in the habit of saying more and more is that when we talk about who's in Flagstaff, we like to talk a lot about who gets to stay in Flagstaff. And I think that conversation needs to shift to who gets to come to Flagstaff. When I think of the victims of climate change, what I think of is the family in Phoenix who can't afford to get the air conditioning fixed in their car. They deserve a chance to move up to Flagstaff and start a new home here as much as anybody does, and more so than second homeowners who are just looking for a way basically to spend 18 hours in traffic on I-17 every weekend. But that's neither here nor there. So when I talked about we will never build ourselves into affordability, the pressure wasn't, you know, oh, how can we come, let's go find a nice mountain town where we can work remotely. the pressure is there's going to be a lot of people looking to leave where they're at and to come here as relief for the continuing pressures we're putting globally on the climate issues. And that's not going to go away. And for every house we build, we're going to get someone willing to pay $1 million for it. So I really like that this is where the rubber hits the road, and we're sitting here struggling on one side with the tension of what we can get, and you're sitting here struggling on the other side with, you know, how do I appease my investors, and how do I bring a product that I can be proud of into this community, and, you know, sort of wiggle your way into the community de facto as well. I see you're wearing a vest tonight. I was in Phoenix over the weekend. I did not need a vest. So I'm sure you appreciate the opportunity to come up here and do business. And I think there is a solution to this. I think there's a way to move forward in the middle. And above all, what I hope we can also do, and this hasn't really come up much, but maybe this can be trailblazing. Maybe this is something that that gets passed around, that we can even showcase and advertise, you know, in this slippery new landscape. How do we find ever new solutions to housing affordability issues all over the map in our country? And maybe the kind of partnerships you're forging here today and that we're struggling to figure out tonight can be a part of that larger conversation in other locales as well. So let's keep the conversation moving forward. I'm certainly not willing to gum up what I see here as potential solutions and innovative new techniques and approaches to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Aslan. We have Vice Mayor, and then we'll go to Councilmember McCarthy.
Thank you. You know, this is tough. I was not sure how the conversation was going to go tonight. Housing has changed in the year that I've been on council, and I appreciate you coming with honesty. That means a lot. And this is what we're faced with. A couple of thoughts for me. I do think we can figure this out. I believe that we need to expand on working with our nonprofits, whether it's Devana with Housing Solutions, Eric with Habitat for Humanity, et cetera. I think that will be crucial. And you're right, a year ago I wouldn't have thought that, but I do now. I definitely think right of first refusal, absolutely. And I just want to keep the discussion going on those 10 lots and with the nonprofits, and let's get creative. Let's see what we can do. And again, thank you for coming and just being honest with us, and I'm really happy we can have the discussion out here on the dais. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember McCarthy.
Thank you. On my street, and a lot of streets that I know around me, we have houses that nobody lives in them. They're weekender houses. They're people that are up here, sometimes they're only here like once every 2 months for 2 days. That's housing that is not available to people that want to live in this town. So my question is, are there any restrictions in this development on the rental properties or the ownership properties on short-term rentals and on second home rentals? In other words, people having a weekender house that they only spend 2 days every 3 months in. Question.
I don't know. Mayor, Councilman McCarthy, I think we'll have to get back to you on that one. I can tell you that's an advantage of the rental project, right? Is it the rental opportunities as those are for local? I think we're going to have to get back to you on the CCNRs. I haven't seen the CCNRs.
Mayor Deasy, Councilmember McCarthy, we'll have to get back to you. We did put restrictions in the development agreement as best we legally could. There was some restriction on what we could do, but the goal, we constantly are getting developers coming from all over the country that want to build housing and run it through as single-family housing and then turn it to rental. Make it 25 Airbnb homes, which we consistently say, no, thank you. But just know that's where the pressure is, and that is an area of asset class that there is massive demand in. So those are not things we're entertaining, but I believe that I would have to review the development agreement, but I believe we put in restrictions for short-term rentals as best we could legally back when we did the development agreement.
Okay, and maybe you can look into that. To me personally, that would be a very strong selling point if we can address those real issues. Thank you. Appreciate your offer, or your comment.
Thank you, Councilmember McCarthy. Ms. Starr has a comment, and then Councilmember Salas.
Thank you, Mayor, and Councilmember McCarthy. Any home ownership affordability through either a city program, Housing Solutions, or Habitat for Humanity all require owner occupancy, and that owner occupancy is verified on either an annual or biannual basis through a notarized statement. So anything working directly with an affordability program does require owner occupancy.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Councilmember Salas?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am enthused to move this forward for the sake of workforce housing. I mean, keep in mind, 38% of the workforce employed in Flagstaff lives outside Flagstaff city limits. I applaud Mr. Crutchfield, Ms. Shuby in coming up with this new ideas, addressing the new realities that have evolved from 4 years ago, from 3 years ago, because I remember the pond conversation three years ago. I do want to point out what Ms. Shuby has mentioned earlier. It's all about balancing all our priorities. Priority with sustainability, priority with workforce housing, and priority with making this project a reality. I do remember, Mr. Crutchfield, that you are a pioneer. I remember when we had the discussion on Sky Cottages, you're the first developer who committed to 100% electric. And that speaks to your and your partners' commitment to develop sustainably and smartly in Flagstaff. I do want to mention, when we speak of workforce housing, I think there has to be some kind of check and balance. Could be a proof of employment, that the resident is actually, is employed in Flagstaff. Potential discussion point. I do applaud the intent to donate the 10 units to a nonprofit. I'd like to see that through, and the right of first refusal. But first and foremost, this project needs to happen. So let's put the pedal to the metal soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Salas. Well, let's kind of bring it all together here for everything we've been hearing. First of all, I do hear a majority in which I also include myself for the right of first refusal. Secondly, I do want to clear up with the vacation rental parts. That is, short-term rentals is really important. So for those that are being sold, if we can, because we have had DAs with other entities in town that have had that specification. I'll need a council majority on this, but I know I got McCarthy over here. We have a thumbs up from Vice Mayor, and if we have a fourth to put in the additional language, and I think that's a yes from Aslan. Yep.
So Mayor, Council, I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Sterling, City Attorney. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to make sure, is this a direction from council to put it on for a vote at a regular meeting? Is that what we're getting?
Sorry, repeat that?
Just wanting to clarify, is this direction that you're talking about as far as whether there's a majority of council direction to put it on a regular meeting for a vote? Because we're in a work session here, and if that's the direction to put this on or a regular meeting, so be it. I just, maybe that's for discussion yet, but just wanted to check in on that.
Yeah, Lindsay, do you want to?
Yeah, Mayor Deasy, thank you, Sterling, for that comment. That is the direction that we're looking for tonight.
Yep.
I am feverishly writing all of these notes down. My suggestion is we get all of this in writing, put an application in. The staff will share it with you. We'll send you our development agreement, which points we were able to meet. But if you could agendize it, if it's a direction to get it on a calendar, I know Roars is looking to move forward, and we are too. We'd love to see a shovel in the ground for this project. And so because the property is in escrow, time is of the essence. Again, not your problem, but we'd love to work with you expeditiously. We'll get a draft to you right away.
Well, we need the units for sure. But the other question then comes down to the number of lots available to a nonprofit. So I would like to see a higher number. I really would. And if that number is taken out of the 160 for the promise that it's okay, it's 150 units, not 160 that are rental, and we're going to give 20 lots, I would like to see if that pencils out on your side of things, because, yeah, we can, I think out of the 170, I would like to see more home ownership options as opposed to rental options. I think we all would. I would like to ask that you pencil that out on your end and see what you can do. Excellent.
Yeah, Mayor noted, and for the record, since Walter said we will do the best we can, and we will. We'll take this back and work really hard.
Thank you. And I did see a lot of nods from council on that behalf, so I think, you know, those are some of the ones I've been hearing to wrap up our conversation here that we would be interested in. Aside from that, is there any other loose ends that we need to go over? And that's to council members, city manager, anyone who there's a loose end we need to give proper direction on. But I think that about covers it. All right, I'll take the silence as a thumbs up. City manager.
Just really appreciate the dialogue. I think it's very productive. And I know that time is of the essence for this development team. So appreciate the council spending the time and expressing your thoughts.
And I appreciate the open forum on this. This needs to be the way we're doing things overall, I believe. You know, there are legal questions we got to deal with the e-session, but these are very important to have public, and I truly and sincerely appreciate you all being here to be a part of that. All right.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. All right, we're down to agenda item number 15. That is public participation. Anyone? I'm getting a no from Annie. And then we're down to agenda item 16, which is informational items, 2 from mayor, council, and city manager. And Austin, all these seat changes, I'm trying to think. Councilmember Shimoni, we'll start with you.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
And if you're not prepared, you're only allowed to say half the comments you are wanting to.
I know, it's more going to be like a third, so that's fine. I guess I'll just share that I had the opportunity to go down to Tucson over the weekend, and I got to visit the American Rehab Campus, the ARC, and they're an agency who is looking to build both in Phoenix and in Flagstaff, a rehab campus for long-term treatments. And it was a real amazing opportunity getting to walk that campus. They also have a detox facility. So they're able to take folks at times if the police department or whomever needs to drop someone off, they allow them to do that. And then they're able to give that person the medical clearance to then enter their program voluntarily. It was a really nice campus. It was impressive what they were able to do with the hotel that they renovated. And I was just really impressed with the program at large and how many employees were former clients of the ARC. That was really humbling and inspiring to see. And that everyone that we spoke to was very excited about Flagstaff opening up and wanted to transfer up to Flagstaff for our weather and our good living. Tomorrow we have an NAU Giving Day photo opportunity for the council. I just wanted to share that. And there's also an executive CJCC executive committee meeting from 3 to 5 p.m. And those are open to the public if anyone wants to tune in. And then let me just see if there's anything else noteworthy to bring up. Give me just 1 second. I believe that is all. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. You know, I'll just say that I had the opportunity to be a judge for the Youth of the Year competition with the Boys and Girls Club today. And it was a real honor to be there and work with these youth members and hear from them and be inspired by them and help them along their way of being young leaders and future leaders. But that's all I'll share for now, and thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Let's see, yesterday I went down to our state capitol and I helped give a proclamation for Water Professionals Week that is also part of our Water Awareness Month. And I did bring back a pin for everybody on council. And tomorrow we do have that photo up and at 8 a.m. as part of the NAU Giving Day. And with NAU being such an important part of our community, the dollars raised on Giving Day go directly to fund NAU projects, programs, scholarships, and more. So you can donate at givingday.nau.edu. And another way to show support is by wearing your blue and gold tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember McCarthy?
Go Jacks. That's all I have tonight.
Councilmember Eslin?
I don't have much. I just learned apparently that a car drove through the Chipotle, and I hope everybody is okay in that unfolding situation that's happening right now.
Thanks.
I will have more updates for next week. Looking forward to a productive weekend and a meeting with Congressman O'Halloran on Friday, which I'm still learning about. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Salas?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am tuning in from Washington, D.C. because I'm attending the National Association of Workforce Boards Conference on behalf of Arizona at Work, Coconino Workforce Board. Interestingly, one of the sessions this morning was about housing stability as a prerequisite to workforce outcomes, meaning, you know, when an individual has stable housing, then they are able to pursue workforce opportunities and have greater success in career training and employment. Big picture here in terms of workforce boards nationwide and the reauthorization of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, as well as opportunities for municipalities and towns and cities to be actively involved in the workforce system, as well as potential future federal advocacy, because for the workforce development funding is at a historic low and adjusted for inflation. So for funding levels are $3 billion less today than in 2000. So there's some aspect there for future advocacy that I can present to council when the time comes. But hey, I've been on the roll since 4:30 our time here. So good night and go Jacks. Thank you.
I thought you were at the Grand Canyon.
Thank you, Councilmember Salas. I'll just touch base on a few things. On Saturday was the ceremony for the Greater Buffalo Park, and I want to thank my colleagues and everyone who were there and who worked very hard to protect the Greater Buffalo Park. It was a great celebration. Aside from that, yes, we'll be meeting on Friday, likely with Congressman O'Halloran, to discuss infrastructure dollars and see what we can get to get those dollars into Flagstaff. Also, I'll be touring the Boys and Girls Club tomorrow, or Thursday rather. And I'm also looking forward to the Alliance for the Second Century, which is our quarterly meeting with all the main government institutions in town, FUSD, NAU, et cetera, that we have very productive conversations and coordinate our efforts and see where they overlap so we can be as productive and collaboratory as possible. So, but with that, I am tapped out. So, anything from you, City Manager, before I get my band?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Adjourned.